number of flight hours, we had 98 accidents. The following year, we recorded one less. However, this accident rate was still high because in that year alone, we flew 110,000 hours. Now, if you compare that with last year, as we said, this was well over 600,000 hours. The following year, we saw a 70% increase in the number of accidents, going to 164. Now, when we compare our data with other states, and ECAO and IATA also confirms that, due to the fact that for 2 years we had pilots not flying, there were recency recurrency issues, we saw a worldwide phenomenon when the accident rate went up. But of course, in the last year, we've done better, with the number of accidents going down by 15%. So we are now doing a bit of a deep dive just to explain areas of category of operations where we've seen issues. Now, at the very bottom, colleagues will notice that the RPES industry, there were 26 aircrafts. Of course, with ECAO's definition of what an aircraft is, we now include RPES accidents. Now, if you just block off the middle year, you'll notice RPES moved from 1 accident to 26 in just 2 years. So this exponential increase is a cause for concern, and there are specific action plans to deal with that. Now, on the ATO side, we broke even when you're comparing year-to-year data with 38 accidents, and once more, we have specific action plans to just ensure that we help that industry. However, the good news was that for both the GA and non-type certificated environment, we saw a decrease in both environments. In fact, the increase was 28% and 29% respectively. Now, for people who love data or do data analysis, they will tell you that when two sub-industries standing side by side record such improvement, closely guarded, it means there's a close correlation or common denominator. And our view, and at least having talked to certain role players, is that the general aviation safety strategy is starting to bear fruit, and we are encouraged. This is really one particular slide that is really sobering, because we're talking about people who lost their lives pursuing their passion or their work. However, we're still seeing numbers that are improving. If you look from data from 2 years back, you'll see a linear decline. Again, this tells you that this is systematic, and there are things that are being done to ensure safer skies. In the last year, we recorded 9 accidents which were fatal, resulting in 12 fatalities. This is due mostly to the fact that most of our accidents are single-occupant events. Now, it's also important that we contextualize this data in a sense that in our state, the mortality or fatality rate is 6.5%. When you look at data from Australia, their fatality rate is 12%. In Canada, 10%. In France, they recorded 24% fatal accidents. So we are doing much better, but this picture can still improve. Operational categories that were leading causes for fatal accidents is, of course, in the NTCA domain. Mostly these are home builds. Their certification standard is not great, and their crash survivability is somewhat compromised. But the good news, even with those numbers, is if you look at aerial works, normally this is really a high-risk environment, low flying, if a margin for error is quite small, but we've seen that in the last 2 years, their data has improved, and there are lessons to be learned there that we can apply in other sectors. Now, when we look at the accident rate, again, this is data we can compare with other states. To your extreme left, you will notice that in the commercial and scheduled environment, we still have a 0% increase. You will have heard the DM say in the morning, it's been over 30 years. I can tell you it's been 36 years to be to be direct on those numbers, that we've not had a major accident that occurred on our shores. And I think having heard from the captains of industry, I think we've really done well as a state with our training, with our recency and oversight. So we'd like to keep that record going. To the far right, of course, is an aggregate of the accident rate. It's gone down from 3.46 to 178. Now at this stage, you can pause and just do your own analysis. So on one hand, we've increased the amount of flight time by 50%, decreased number of absolute accident by 15%. Now we've slashed the accident rate by a further 50%. So I think congratulations to CAA and colleagues in attendance. Would like to keep that going. So the next slide, I think we're connecting the first slide, number of aeroplanes movements, to where we are with our accident rate, and I'll not labor this part. To the 4 bars to the left, of course, it's our accident data, slightly different because the other states we're comparing with work on calendar year, and we've had to adapt our data to financial years. So you will obviously see in the first 2 years, things were pretty low. Again, low flying, lockdown conditions that were severe. But when we opened the skies, the number of accidents increased. But then in the following year, there was a decrease. Now we put our data side by side with Australia because the regulatory framework number of movements are really close to ours. And what you see with them is initially they have almost twice the amount of accidents that we had. But in the formative years, the last 2 financial years, or at least calendar years in their case, there was a decline. Again, mostly due to the fact that their lockdown conditions were a bit severe, even longer. And once they opened their skies, like everyone else, the accidents went up. But then the data from Canada, we've gleaned some insight from that, studied their data closely. Not every aspect is copy and paste, but there are some scalable solutions they have. But we've seen that their data set really looks good, and they've managed to decrease the number of accidents. We will not speak much into the data from France because we didn't have data insights to sit, to be at this podium and make conclusions. But safe to say, our data still looks good side by side with other states. So this is really the most underwhelming slide because if you look at the number of serious incidents that we recorded in the last financial year, we're sitting with 1,515. Now, for the growth and activity we've seen, 15 is just too low. It's inconceivable that would have only recorded those number of serious incidents. And really the call to industry is near misses, all mishaps should be recorded because data analysis, at least from ECAIO, shows that a number of serious incidents or mishaps will happen before we have a catastrophic event. So if industry doesn't share the data with us, it robs us opportunities to deal with causals and put mechanisms in place. I will not dwell on this next 4 slides, but we categorize and really do a further analysis on causals based on contribution. So flight crew contributes 58% of accidents. Now, please understand that this is not to blame pilots for what's happening. We often send out a pilot questionnaire after an accident. We do a parallel investigation, and then the data converge, and it gives us this data. But of concern for us, and having talked to one of my colleagues, the analysis was really stuck. If you look at the first block that says lost directional, which is 21% or a fifth of all causals, you will see that it happens at the takeoff or landing phase of flight. If you skip the next one, the green, and you go to the third one, 12% is heavy landing. And you will soon see a theme. The next one says unstable approach, which again leads to the first block or third block. Then it says error in judgment on landing. The next one, loss of control. The sixth one says fail to extend landing gear. So from data analysis, it's very clear that currently we have an issue with putting the aircraft on the ground. Now this all can be rectified through training, through exercise, through conversing around this data set. And our passion really in accident investigations is that the data is more useful when we talk about it and deliberate on it than when it's on our laptops. So we'll skip the next slide. The second highest ranking causal is engine power plant mechanical issues. Again, we have just one big block contributing 29%, and to all aviators and pilots, I think this is really avoidable. I think fuel starvation should really not be a thing we deal with in our industry. Not all of it is negligent. Sometimes guys do their flight plan with specific amount of fuel, and they fly into headwinds, and then they have to divert, and before you know it, they run out of fuel. But we believe this can be rectified. If a fatal accident happens because you ran out of fuel, it is just a dire situation. So I'll skip this slide. We'll look at causal or collisions. So historically, aircraft colliding with objects either on the ground or in the air used to be the third most highest ranking issue with our causals. And I have to say, again, most of this was in the agricultural world. I think if you're doing crop spraying or game capture, you often fly low, error of margin is quite diminished, and normally they'll collide with objects on the ground or with power lines. And the CAI, of course, went on a journey with them, and we've seen a drastic improvement. In fact, what is interesting with the data is that the accident profile looks one-to-one with the general accident profile. In other words, the issues were structural, but once you've seen the results, they work like a charm. So we moved from 2 years back with 18 accidents, most of which were fatal, to only 3 accidents in the recently concluded financial year. So I think guys in the agricultural industry, we see you and we want to learn. Now, this next slide really doesn't reveal much. I think accidents by nature are activity-based. The more flying you do, the more the risk that a mishap might happen. So over the last 3 years, data has moved a bit up in line with the amount of movement that we have seen. Now, we ended up in the last year with 2,800 incidents. I can just assure colleagues that each one of those incidents, we look at them closely, we understand the causes, we speak to airlines about them, and really one of the reasons we've seen the improvements we've seen is there's a lot of data that we get from these statistics, and again with industry and with CAA, we then start to put action plans. I'll spend a few more minutes on the next slides. So we've got 2 ways of doing this. Either I explain to you what an approx is, or you look at the picture that you see there. But we've seen worldwide that the number of approxes have increased. Just yesterday, I got 2 reports, one from China, one from the UK. An approx really is when the distance between 2 aircrafts is diminished, sometimes to dangerous proportions. And what we want to do is give this data to industry, especially our airlines, because 90% of these incidents happen in controlled airspace. So what concerns us in particular as data analysts is that numbers often tell a story. So if you look at the first quarter, you'll see that you move from 7 to 39. Now, this kind of increase, which is a theme for the next 3 quarters, normally indicate that we are getting even much closer to a catastrophic event. So ourselves and CAA, of course, have put together remedies for this, but it's going to take ourselves and industry coming together and discussing these things. Of course, it's a worldwide phenomenon. In the USA, even more pronounced. They've got even more coverage, and we're all concerned in our industry worldwide, actually, at this increase, but still actions can be done and we can improve this. So the next slide really tells you of the levels of danger, and I won't overplay this part, but there were 13 Cat A occurrences. Cat A means the risk of collision existed and the pilot or ATC had to take evasive actions. Now, this is quite uncomfortable, and it's something we don't want to see. The next category, again, we move from 9 to 36. If you plot this in a percentage increase, we're talking thousands of percent in increase. Again, these are things that we are able to deal with, and I think we'll see them decrease. 4 more slides to go, I think. So, drone infringements is one of the concerns that we are dealing with because drones by nature don't have the certification standard we see in manned aviation. They are more erratic in nature. Now, a drone infringement just simply means that a drone has went into controlled airspace, and I can bet you nothing is as uncomfortable as a pilot with 200 passengers on final approach and see something just go past you. You don't know if it's a terror issue or it's negligent. But this really, colleagues, is data that we have to look at closely, and we have to deal with these aspects. Of a concern as well is the issue of laser infringements. It will occur to us that there are people who think it's a nice spot to sit at an airport with a laser and just blast it into the cockpit. I think it was 18 months ago that a pilot on final approach was partially blinded for a few seconds with 200 passengers on board. So this is really not fun or funny. We did a stacked up approach just to show how the data works. In this instance, you look at Q2, our winter months, we have less incidents. You look at Q3, summer months, October, November, December, you see an exponential rise. So we are suspecting, one of the key assumptions at least, is that this could be done perhaps more as a fun thing than not, because the data is just peculiar in how it stacks up. But of course, efforts are there that these aspects have to be dealt with. One of the stats I like to present is confidential hazard reporting. This really is when industry and flying passengers come to the CAA in confidence, confidentially, and they tell us the things that they've seen or observed, which they believe are incorrect. And though we've seen a drop in the last year with 34 incidents reported, we can assure colleagues that we believe, at least from the analysis of data, that these 34 reports could have resulted in about 17 accidents happening. So industry needs to continue to play their role, tell us of the things they see when ourselves and CAA are not there, be our eyes and ears, but we act on this data in a confidential sense. Most of it is low flying or substandard maintenance, and of course we want to deal with all these issues. I'm doing a slide count here, so there's 2 to go, and I will be out of your way. So I've heard the DCA say this, and of course it excited me because this is really why we do our job. We issue safety recommendations to prevent reoccurrence of similar incidents and accidents. And colleagues will see that from your right, if you count 2 rose, we issued most of the safety recommendations to the CAA. And repeating my boss's phrase, it's because regulatory framework, rulemaking, and oversight are the leading deterrent to accidents. And we have to again compare our record with other states. We've issued 64 safety recommendations at a closure rate of almost 80%. Australians have closed 75 of 40, Canada 85 of 26. Our counterparts in the USA have closed 72 of 43. So as a state, we really are doing well. So our last slide is really the reason we present our data. The question is, what are the lessons learned? What can we do differently? What can we improve? I'll not go through all those actions, of course, highlighting a few. I think the first thing we will want to see in this financial year is that the CAA should continue to extract maximum value from the Global Aviation Safety Strategy. As alluded to, we believe the decrease, particularly in the NTCA and GA world, is because of strategies in place supported by industry. So we want to see this record continue. Now, if you just skim through all these points, you'll see AID, CAA, industry. So this is a tri-party environment of change, but we then are proposing that between ourselves and CAA, that we have specific focus groups, ATOs. Things can improve, certainly. RPES, we've seen that there's been an exponential increase, and we have to resolve that. We've seen other states, Canada being one of them, the UK being one of them, to deal effectively with air proxies. We have specific work groups which look at this data. Of course, maybe I stop here. We want to encourage industry to record all near misses. Please don't think you're sparing us of a lot of work if you're not telling us that there are issues out there. We want to prevent catastrophic events. And of course, when we've analyzed our data, there is close to 60% of accidents deemed as avoidable accidents. That by itself is an oxymoron, because you say avoidable, you say accident. But what we're saying is there are mishaps that can be prevented with proper planning, better discipline, and really compliance to regulation and aspects of safety. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you.
Tabete, I'd like you to just remain on stage for any questions. For the purposes of time, I'll only be taking 2 questions from the floor. So are there any takers? First come, first serve.
I thought you said 1.
2.
Oh, okay.
You are that important for this conference. I'll take the gentleman at the back. Is there anybody else? No takers? Fantastic. So I guess you win. 1 question.
Thank
Oh, all right. There we go.
There's
we have a second
another one.
taker.
Okay.
Sir, could you just let us know your name, where you come from, and of course, shoot your question.
Good afternoon. My name is Samuel Mlangeni. I'm from Airbus. My question is in twofold. It's one package question with 2 questions in it. Thank you very much for the presentation, and I can see extensive data that has been analyzed over a period of time. Now today we have this data. From our perspective, I'm speaking on behalf of industry, unfortunately, it's what challenges and opportunities exist in improving the aviation safety with the data we have in South Africa. And another one is, how can stakeholders work together to overcome these challenges and leverage on those opportunities? Thank you.
Okay. Can I take this one?
Yes, please.
So I think in terms of challenges, data analytics becomes key, and for us, it's a matter of turning data into intelligence and actions that really show a decrease in the number of accidents. So I think, of course, this leads us to having a number of conversation across board. As we made a slight remark about pilots, I think our idea is we need to get this data deep in industry. Industry must question our data. We need to learn to expand how we analyze our data. But I think the key for us is we need to ensure that we are in particular forums where pilots come together to discuss data, where ATOs have their work groups, where RPEs have functions where we can discuss with them. And I think in terms of opportunities, of course, we expect that with more practice, with guys having really relearned the skill to fly, we will see even improved data. If we compare our data with other states, we are about 6 or 7 months ahead of other states. And that is a good thing, and it's a good thing because the CAA with industry, when COVID hit and lockdowns were severe, there was some negotiations on how do we allow guys to fly. And those decisions in particular led to us not seeing a more steep rise in accidents. In terms of fatal accidents, I think colleagues will understand that is a key data set that can make or kill our industry, because no parent will want their children to fly if they think it is unsafe. There are, of course, other areas. We had conversations with DGs and CEOs the last 2 days, and one thing that featured heavily is runway incursion and excursions. And there we see there's an opportunity for us to work together. I think what has really emboldened me in the last year at least is that I noticed that when we put our data out there, the people use the data. So there is further need to collaborate. I think 8 of our 11 action plans and safety priorities are around conversations. And when we say approxes increase, it's not good enough I present the data here. We need to go to airline associations and have conversation, and we say, how do we use this data as a step up? So I think I've answered the questions, but there's really much more work to be done, but I think we're ready and willing to do that work. Thank you.
All right, number 2, and the last one for this Q&A.
Thank you for the presentation. Runway incursion and excursion, I call it an accident waiting to happen.
Yeah.
How do you deal with it? Thank you.
So normally when a person says thank you, you must know there's a loaded question coming. So I was ready for that. So first, I think we have to look at our landscape. Someone spoke here and said, probably if we have 90 airports, how many of them are controlled by AXA and how many of them are unmanned aerodromes? Of course, for unmanned aerodromes, there's unmanned rules. And I think that is really the first place for us to collaborate. We see, I almost said livestock, but we see livestock running, getting on runways, and there's things that can be done. Of particular concern for us, again, we've looked at data from ATOs, and after this presentation, I'm running away because my colleagues will want to kill me. But in the ATO space, we see that we're losing aircraft on takeoff. And the takeoff and landing surely should be amongst the first rudimentary aspects you learn as a pilot. And we see there's an area for us to work, not an area to blame. Because remember, we do our investigations to improve, not apportion blame. So we have to work with stakeholders. And there are times when we believe, again, I use the word avoidable accident, a particular case, a guy on final approach sees giraffes on the runway, and he loses them for a moment and still lands. And that was catastrophic, avoidable. So I think better discipline. We always say in aviation, Ma'am, one phrase to take away from here, takeoff is optional, but landing perhaps is not. And guys with human factors on landing, they are maybe with more pressure and making errors that we believe through training and practice, conversations, we can improve. But I need to caution that when you look at other states, especially Australia and Canada, we have far less of those issues. So it's not really, because when you show the causals, it doesn't really rank that high. But we know that if a mistake happens, normally you don't recover from that. But I think it's something that is really on our sides. We want to improve all data sets. Even if there were 2 accidents, we still believe we can optimize that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Themba Tabete, we appreciate your time. Ladies and gentlemen, we're just going to rejig the program a little bit. You would have noticed that there were supposed to be another 3 speakers after Themba Tabete, but what we're going to do now is skip straight to the panel discussion on aviation security culture awareness. I'd like to call the moderator for this particular conversation, Mr. Luvuyo Ekreke, who will definitely tell you who his panel is. And he'll be talking about the importance of embedding a security culture, awareness around recent security threats, including cybersecurity, and how the industry can enhance their own security culture campaigns. Mr. Ekreke, please join me on stage.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to be seated there, but I will stand here to gain some confidence first. And once that I've done that successfully, then I'll proceed and sit down. It's more intimidating because I can't see faces because of the lights, but I'll be fine. I will invite the participants to this panel. First of all, I'll invite Ms. Makhosazana Ngabiti. Ms. Ngabiti has been in aviation for over 20 years. She's currently the Senior Manager for Training and Certification at the Civil Aviation Authority on the aviation security side. What I'll highlight from her CV is the fact that she's a member of the ICAO Working Group on Training. The reason I'm highlighting that one is because that is the team that has assisted us with developing aviation security culture and the tools that we're using for it. Ms. Ngabiti, please help me welcome her to the stage. Thank you. I wasn't sure, Makhosi, if you were going to dance to that song. And then next, I will invite Colonel Caroline Naidu, retired. Ms. Naidu is the Senior Manager for Aviation Security at OR Tambo, responsible also for Bram Fisher Airport. In the 27 years experience she's got in the South African Police Services, I'll highlight her work in covert operations, security tactics, and specialized investigations. Please help me welcome Ms. Naidu to the stage. Oh, maybe let me assist you. General Petros has given his apology. He could not make it, and Ms. Naidu has kindly agreed to stand in for him. Then I will invite to the stage Mr. Heinrich. Heinrich Maretz, yeah. His name, Heinrich, it's written correctly. It doesn't have a D. Heinrich has got 15 years in aviation security and cargo security management, and he's passionate about managing setup projects as well as training and mentoring. Please welcome Mr. Maretz to the stage. And lastly, help me welcome Brigadier Duncan Scott. Brigadier Scott is with the South African Police Services. He's been with them for over 32 years. I think of interest to me, he's currently the commanding officer at OR Tambo International Airport. but also I'm interested in his CV, in the fact that he's worked on counter-terrorism and and is currently with border policing. Please help me welcome Brigadier Duncan Scott. Just an introduction whilst the colleagues are settling down. I had a longer introduction. I'll cut it in the interest of time. And the theme is reimagining the future of aviation safety and security in this instance. It was mentioned this morning that we keep changing. For example, 2011, 9/11. 9/11 was, not 2011, 9/11. 9/11 was a watershed mark for aviation security. What happened in New York changed our world forever in aviation security. But you know about that one. What some of you might not know is other events that happened after that one. I'll talk to you about two lesser known events. 2010. 2010, two aircrafts were stopped in transit. One in the UAE, not stopped, but were in transit, one in the UAE, Dubai, one in the UK Midlands. In those aircraft, they found between 300 and 400 grams of plastic explosives. Those aircraft were supposed to fly to the US. Thankfully, those explosives were taken off at those transit stops. Now, those explosives were hidden in printer cartridges in both instances. They originated in Yemen. What I want us to think about is, why were they discovered? It was not through the measures that you see at the airport. It was intelligence. There was intelligence that those were supposed to be and those were found. I'll tell you about an incident in 2017 in Australia. A bomb was intercepted at check-in. The bomb was hidden inside a meat grinder. Why was it intercepted? It's because it was too heavy to be checked in. In fact, the same gentlemen that were found guilty for that incident are the same gentlemen that are accused of having tried to make a chemical explosive in Sydney. In fact, the ingredients of the meat grinder, I'll call them that, had been flown in from Turkey into Australia. So those explosives had already flown. What am I saying? Security culture. We'll talk more about that, but let me talk to the colleagues. Okay. Do I sit here or am I too far, Brigadier? Is it fine? Okay, good. All right. Maybe Brigadier Scott, let me start with Makhosi. Makhosi, let me start with you. Seeing that you've been very involved in the establishment of security culture globally, can you just give us briefly an explanation of what security culture is and what it entails?
Thank you, Mr. Qage. Colleagues, security culture, it is by definition a security-related set of norms, values, beliefs, and attitude inherent in our daily operations. And those values, beliefs, and attitudes are reflected by the actions and behaviors of the people working in an aviation security organization. However, the definition on its own, it doesn't make sense until it's entrenched to the people, to the employees, starting from leadership to the lower level of employees. They need to acknowledge that security is everybody's responsibility. And therefore, if security is everybody's responsibility, the leadership is responsible to articulate security as a core value rather than an obligation or a burdensome expense. So what security culture is all about, there are a variety of aspects into it, of which the positive working environment that encourage the employees, either from leadership up to the lower level, up to a screener in all the organization. It can be the regulated agent, it can be the training organization, it can be the non-consigner, it can be the airport screener, cleaner. Everybody at the airport need to be trained and be aware of security culture. And one of the things that is most important is reporting. Reporting is very important. We need to train our employees on reporting. If you see something suspicious, report it. And we rely on senior management to take those reports and to take them seriously and make sure that there is a response to those responses. Vigilant. We need to fight against complacency. The threat is real, and we need to make sure that we are vigilant. When you see something that is suspicious, report it. And also cyber. Cyber is a threat. It's real, so it has to be a priority for our organizations. And there must be measures in place, response plan in place in each and every organization. So security culture is everybody's responsibility, and we want to encourage all the stakeholders to continue, because that has been started at airports. They've been doing security campaigns, and we need to continue and make sure that we enhance security culture in our organization. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ngabit. Did I say Ms. Ngabit at the beginning? Ne? I wouldn't want to offend Mr. Ngabit. Thank you, ma'am. Brigadier Scott, from your experience, you are there on the ground daily. Do you think security culture is important? And do you think it can help with policing if we implement it correctly?
Undoubtedly so. Am I on? Am I audible? Undoubtedly so. And I just want to compliment what the first speakers just said, is that we know that security culture is a need. It needs to be there. And it's basically trained into police officers and to security officials, etc. But the enemy of a security culture, for that matter as well, is the very complacency which we were speaking about now. And of course the insider threat when we start to get to crime and corruption within the actual organizations at the airport. But in short, security culture is what the police is based upon. It's one of the foundations that we base most of our values on. We are a security-based organization, and hand in hand with that security culture goes discipline. And this is why it's so important, because without the discipline that goes hand in hand with that security culture, eventually it starts to become neglected, abused. And I just want to say as well that a security culture is something that we need to inculcate over time. It's not something that we need to also just put in place in our police training, for instance. And I think this is one of the areas that the police needs to focus more. We tend to bring, and this is speaking to your, will this improve policing? We tend to bring new constables out of the police training academies. These new constables are what we want to see. They're vigilant, they're out there, they're trying to catch criminals. But what happens over time? Why do police officers seem to become complacent? And I know that there would be many a person here that would have an example of such a behavior. But it's because we don't spend enough time, I believe, in actually putting members through retraining, refreshing, renewing, and constantly ensuring that inculcation of the security culture remains at a high point. Top of the mind, always there, something that becomes a social norm. And we see this even within the SAPs. We take our uniform dress code. It's part of our culture to present ourselves and our image well to the public. But in saying that now, there is a bar and a standard that should not be crossed. And essentially, that's what the security culture is as well. We need something to be put in place, and specifically at airports, which needs a higher measure of a security culture, than we would find even in the classic policing out in the stations with respect to that. Because of the sensitivity and the nature of the assets that we're there to protect, the environment, the aircraft, etc. as well, and the threat and the risk that comes against these environments such as airports from those that have ill intent. So we definitely as an organization need to consider, and there are measures that we do put in place for that matter at the airport in order to try and bring our members back to that level of vigilance again. But I believe we'll get to that later in discussion.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brigadier Scott. I see you want to add something, Ms. Naidu?
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. Am I audible?
I think they don't want to hear you at the back. Okay, let's try again.
Hello. Am I audible?
I think she wanted a roving mic from the word go, I think, so she's fine. Okay, yeah,
Am I
thank you.
audible now?
Let's bring the roving mic, yeah. You must tell me how you did that.
Thank you very much. Yes, my addition would be actually from what the Brigadier has just alluded. Complacency has also become a culture, and very negative culture, which is something that we need to rid of, especially well, all in our environments, particularly the airport environment. When it comes to discipline, is basically how we do things, the daily operations, from as simple as wearing your name, your name tag in a specific way, to actually being ultra vigilant in being able to identify, the undesirable actions and so forth. So it goes a long way that we actually, from discipline, whether it's internal employees, whether it's contracted employees, as long as we are within an airport environment, is basically how we do things, every day. So the importance of the security culture actually is that, further to what Brigadier has just said, is also, in our daily operations, we do practice actions of security, culture. However, with, formalizing it actually to keep, everybody responsible and actually accountable, will also just emphasize the further safety and security of everything that is going on within an airport.
Thank you. Whilst you've got the mic, now let's talk complacency a bit. At AXA, you've got screeners. And the challenge that those screeners have, they sit and look at those machines every day. Nobody has ever come through with an explosive. But we expect them to look for explosives. So that could now breed a complacency. Secondly, South Africans as a people, we are a trusting people. I see someone coming with a reflector, oh, how's it, Brewer, and then, yeah. And then they're able to walk into where they shouldn't be walking. What is AXA doing to try and inculcate or embed security culture in all these people that work within your organization?
Let me firstly state by saying security as a whole is very complex by itself. Then you have these specialized areas. To comment on the screeners, for instance, it does not mean that we have not, because we have not, or a screener has not really detected an explosive, that we are immune to it. They are trained, and there's a specific standard operating procedure that they follow, so that they remain vigilant by looking at the screen for a specific period of time, so that they are able to identify if there is an explosive, then they activate the relevant, special fields as such. So with the security culture being formalized will actually further enhance that which is already being done within an airport environment, in terms of, keeping everyone accountable when it comes to training, that we know that we are, regulated, and we have the training of security culture within KPIs. For instance, he's not, or he or she is not confronted. The security culture that is formalized will basically further enhance that, and also will help in terms of further formalizing certain programs in as far as, the cadre of people that we employ within the security environment, like specialists in terms of behavioral detection and so forth, specialized investigative skills, and as such. So it's basically going to enhance that which is already being done. We cannot stop complacency, I would say, but vigorously dealing with it with formalized programs, I should think that it will help to better our actions.
Thank you. Mr. Maritz, would you like to add on the importance of security culture and what maybe as an airline you are doing at Airlink?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So it's not important, it's crucial. As the saying goes, from an aspect perspective, we have to get it right every time. They only have to get it right once. So that is the crux of the culture. With this in mind, a strong inculcated security culture will ensure that our team is subconsciously and instinctively aware of their AFSEC responsibilities on a daily basis. And this also ensures a less significant chance of complacency, which is the root cause, if I could call it that we were addressing now. And this philosophy is vital in addressing the challenges we as the AFSEC community faces.
Thank you. Brigadier Scott, now, as I see you want to add, maybe as you add, also talk to me, is there a threat in South Africa? I mean, nothing happens here. We're friends with everybody.
That's a loaded
The-
question.
That's a loaded
our only
question.
threat is,
But,
besides electricity, is crime.
Look, to speak on a pretty generic level that I think
Yes.
it's out there in social media, we know that
We keep it generic.
we
yes.
have had foreign embassies announce travel warnings to their citizens to our country as early as last year. We know that we have got issues in Mozambique on the go. We know that the regional terrorism threat is higher than it has been. So the question being, and it's in social media, that there are even certain cells within our country. So this being said, and I'll leave that there, the risk is higher at the moment. And if you are looking as a terrorist now, and I was partly trained that way, to think that way, to think like my opponent, to actually counteract my opponent's actions. One of the most lucrative targets for a terrorist in this country would be a publicly accessible area, which is also a national key point. And that takes us ideally to an airport such as OR Tambo. You can walk freely into that space, and unless the intelligence services, for that matter, have information and we are able to disrupt that threat, a threat like that can manifest itself, which is going to cause chaos. It's going to embarrass the country. And of course, our response to that is, as at the moment, as the South African Police Service at the airport, is we've actually put reaction teams, specially trained reaction teams, on 24/7 shift duty standby at the airport. But even saying that, to respond to any terrorist incident means the incident has already started, and we would only be going in to mitigate the effects of that attack as best as we could. So in short, and I know we're not here to speak about that, but when we get back to the security culture, it's exactly what has been said, that people have to be vigilant, and part of vigilance is understanding the threat that is against you. And unless we educate our people about why they need to be vigilant, it's something that they will not focus on or keep concentrating on, because they will go back to complacency each time. And just a case in point now, one of the better countries in the world at airport security at this stage is Israel, because of the constant threat against them, that the community or the society that works there in the airports and beyond are constantly focused with a security culture to pick up the smallest things that are out of place. Because it's the small things that you pick up that starts to raise the alarm, that enables a response before something can happen. So very crucial to what was said, we need to have that heightened sense of vigilance, but we do that as well by ensuring that our members remain interested in the job that they do. And unfortunately, currently at our airports, not much goes on other than syndicate organized crime. So as far as the attacks are concerned, etc., the last attack we've had at Ortia, attack, if I could put it that way, was with firearms, was on the 18th of July 2020, when there was an attempted arms robbery, which for the first time in Ortia's history, we've actually managed to catch the armed robbers on scene. There was an engagement, no police wounded, but 2 armed robbers killed and 4 wounded for that matter. Others were arrested. They've been sentenced recently to 25 years imprisonment each, those that survived. But that being said, that was brought about by the vigilance of a security person within the warehouse. When they saw what was going down, they went and hid themselves and sent a message to an off-site security manager who alerted the law enforcement to the actual situation. Otherwise, that would not have happened. So it's crucial at our airports that this is actually there, because it also sent a message out that if you come to our Tambo and you have ill intent, that's the possible recourse for you.
No, thank you very much for that. Ms. Nkabit?
Thank you, Mr. Gregor. Just to add to Brigadier Scott, you are not only looking at the threat from outside, but another threat that we have is insider threat. The people that you work with, you meet every day. I mean, if we recall the Ethiopian airline incident, I mean, that was through insider threat. So that is why security culture is very, very important, so that you can be able to see the behavior, the suspicious behavior of your own colleague and report it. So insider threat is also real, and we need to look at that, and that's also where security culture training and awareness comes in.
Thank you. Hendrik, let me come to you, seeing that your boss is here. How important is leadership in terms of inculcating a strong security culture? I'll take Mr. Maritz.
Did you say Heinrich?
Oh,
Yeah.
I didn't hear.
Sorry.
Because we don't know about your boss.
Yeah. Mr. Chair, it starts at the top, doesn't it? The leaders need to set the example. Otherwise, the herd, if I might call it that, will not follow, and you will not get the buy-in. So it has to be a top-down approach. No negotiation.
No, good. And Ms. Naidu. Now, my problem is that if AXA is going to have its own security culture, Airlink their own, the SEPs their own, but we are a community at that particular airport, whether it's Mangaung or whether it's here at Ortia. How do we make sure then that all these organizations are singing from the same hymn book, so to speak?
Thank you for that question, Mr. Kreke. Brigadier and other colleagues here may also input. I think the importance here is the integration of services. The airports integrate with a lot of other stakeholders, almost daily, weekly, monthly, whether it's operational activities, intelligence sharing, there are various platforms. So the manner in which maybe certain culture, as far as security is concerned, may differ a bit, however, the vision is the same. Basically to get back to, enhancing the security activities or actions that to ensure that the airport space is safe. So that collaboration is already happening. But like I said previously, is further to enhance and actually formalizing other areas in as far as security of the airports are concerned. Brigadier.
Thank you. Brigadier Scott?
And I think on the leadership issues, what we did at Ortia in 2021, just past the height of the COVID, a year later, we actually got the security community together and to understand the dynamics at OR Tambo. We are 9 departments and then the airport company themselves, being an SOE at the airport. And all those departments either contribute to the security picture or are part of the security picture or border control process. And considering now the BMA's arrived, the Border Management Authority, so 3 of those will actually be incorporated into the Border Management Authority. But that being said, we actually sat down together and took a very pragmatic view of what we were saying as leaders and said, well, we are the village Ortia. I'm the village policeman, this is the mayor, and we looked at this and we said, how do we fix this? How do we come together as a security group? And we understood something that we play, although it's a secondary role to the core business of that airport, without the security and the security culture being right within the airport, the airport business is ultimately going to suffer, and ultimately our state. So I actually wrote down a couple of things here, because what we actually did say there, and just to say, when we said this was our corporate vision as the security cluster at the airport, securing ORTIA, securing growth. So what I'm trying to say by that as well is when we look at security culture values that we want, the vigilism, etc., we need to also pin those onto the actual values of the organization that we are working for, or those organizations we're working for. Because when we inspect employees, it's not only the security personnel that needs to have a security culture. As it was now said, we actually have the greatest threat to our airport there is the insider threat. And it costs another employee picking up something out of the ordinary that is a general private citizen working at the airport. There's some 38,000 before COVID employees at OR Tambo Airport. So the insider threat needs to be seen by a fellow employee to actually bring it to the attention of the security cluster so that we can actually effectively deal with that. And this actually brings us to that point of, at the moment, has been in the social media about the facilitation through OR Tambo Airport and the severity of that. If our fellow employees move away from complacency and possibly from intimidation and the fear thereof and the retaliation, we need to get to the point where we can take back the good workforce and we start to ostracize those that are actually involved in these type of things. Because again, it will be police officers, security officers, or members of airlines picking up some things out of the ordinary, knowing the right people to call for that, and allowing us to respond to the internal crime that's happening within the airport as well.
Thank you. Before I give you your final words, I'll take 2 questions from the audience if there are any. Going once, going, okay, I see there is a hand. Bob, there's Mr. Gabet over here, and then I see there's a hand at the back, and then I see Pindi and Pratsepo. So I'll take those and then we will.
Thanks, Mr. Kleike. This is not meant to be a criticism, but as a suggestion for the next conference. And that is part of why we're here is security and safety. And I think at the next conference we should have a speaker on dangerous goods, because dangerous goods are as much of a threat, some people think more of a threat perhaps than security. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Mr. Gabet, let me take the right at the back. For those whilst the mic is, for those who are not aware, who are not from this world, dangerous goods is hazardous substances. And Mr. Gabet, I think Pindi is nodding, so the point is taken. We'll look into it. Thank you. Please.
Panel Director, thank you very much. I have a question which is in twofold. The first part of it is to the Airport Authority, and the last one is to Civil Aviation. Chair, you said something about complacency, and you made an example about screeners going through their screening activities without identifying IEDs in most of their screening responsibility, and that can be a big threat to what you called it, the complacency, because people tend to think that, look, these things don't happen, we're just here and creating a routine. So I think one of the important elements to deal with that level of complacency, perhaps, I think the 2 airports authority as Civil Aviation will agree with me, that would be to continuously engage with conducting COVID security analysis. And when you do that, you're also building the confidence of the screeners on the ground. So my first part of the question is, how do we make sure that this is done? And that is the first part. The second part is, when we're doing that, how do we make sure that we also stick within the OUM specification when we build this IED as part of the COVID test, so that they serve a good purpose? By that I mean that we need to create an IED built in such a way that the equipment that is deployed on the ground is able to comply with the components that are put together to build that particular IED? And whose responsibility is it to make sure that people that conduct these coverts on the ground, which will assist in making sure that our people are not falling into the trap of complacency, do make sure that they use the right components that complies to those specifications? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, sir. I'll take Ms. Gwebu here in front.
Thank you, moderator. My question is maybe to Brigadier Scott or even the AXA colleague. I normally see that when we are at the airport environment, there would be these people that are lingering around the airport who normally would come and ask for money and all of those. But also we've been confronted with incidences of car hijackings or theft in parking lots and so on. I just want to check what is the aviation security stakeholders doing, you know, to curb all of these type of incidences, because we've learned now from the media that there would be times where people will be followed right from the airport to their homes. And so that means that these criminal elements have now found their way there. But I'm also really increasingly worried about the people that are there that are just asking money from anybody. I just don't know how that is being managed, because it could also present a security threat.
Thank you. And Mr. Pierre, lastly.
Thank you, Chair. I was looking at Annex 17, and to say to all the stakeholders at the airport, are they aware of Annex 17? That's my first question. The second question is security culture versus discipline. Now, how and when do we put in discipline in place? And I like what Mrs. Naidu has said, that there is collaboration amongst the people, because that is very, very critical. My last question is, at the airport, we've got at least, let me say, 3 ministries. We've got the BMA under Home Affairs. We've got SACA and ATNS under DOT. And we've got the police under Ndatekel. Now, do these 3 ministries sit down and look at the total picture of what is happening in terms of security and how it is addressed, especially inside a threat? Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, sir. I'll start with Ms. Nkabiti. Talk to the question around COVID tests. Just for those who might not be aware, the system, both the equipment and the people, are routinely subjected to COVID, both overt and covert tests. Sometimes my accent, it doesn't come out correctly, but it does. Yeah. So talk to that, Makosi, the tools, if I may call them that are used for these coverts, who decides on them, and yeah, that was that question I would like you to handle.
Okay, thank you, Chair. To answer you, sir, we normally do the covert test, whereby we have the test pieces that simulate the explosives or prohibited items, and we put that through the X-ray machines or on person to check if the trained and certified screeners can be able to pick up on that. So those tools and test pieces, it's CIA that procures them, and we make sure that we check what is relevant at that particular time, that is used. We benchmark with other countries and check what a type of explosives or what a type of ammunitions and stuff that can be used as test pieces. And also to go on to answer the issues of complacency, We also do recertification every year for screeners, and to make sure that they are current each and every year. I think in other countries, some countries, they do it over a period of 2 years, but we make sure that it's every year so that we check if there's, they can be able to be certified so that they can be able to perform those functions. Also at the airport, I think there's tip in the screening machines, also that the tip, when that gun or that...
Tip being? Threat image projection, for those that the acronyms, yeah, go ahead.
Yes, yes. So all of those, they are there to make sure that the screeners, they must stay awake and they must stay vigilant so that they can be able to perform their functions better.
Thank you, ma'am. If I may add, the airport also does its own testing of its own systems. That I know because before they do, they request permission from the CAA. Anybody, and for the information of our colleagues in the media, we did have this a few years ago where the media tried to test our systems. Anybody that has to test an airport system has to request permission from the SACA before doing so. So even the airport themselves, they will ask for permission, they do the test, they give us the results as well afterwards. So we do that. Yeah. And we are, just for information, we are intensifying our testing. We are busy looking to procure the latest test pieces currently. That goes with the latest threat. And we also work closely with the police in terms of getting samples, explosive samples as well. We get them from the police when we need to test. Yeah, so that's an important thing. We do test both the person and that. And Ms., you want to add, Marcos?
Yes, please. I'll also like to encourage the industry as well to say, during briefings, for your screeners especially, I mean, nothing stops you to test them. You know, just throw questions, say, do a search on me, ask them questions. So you don't have to wait for COVID test or any other thing. But I think training can be informal as well, just to refresh them and do some tests on them during their tea time or during their tea briefings as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Naidu, I know you want to add to that. Whilst you're doing that, you can then talk to the loiterers and touters and theft in the parking. I'm sure Brigadier Scott will want to add as well.
Also help. Thank you, sir. Just to add also on IEDs, we've just purchased good pieces which are used at the screening points through random searches that we actually test for certain explosive materials. But of course those require technical training and so forth, but we do have that, so that has already been rolled out to address that. When it comes to loitering, yes, Brigadier Scott, you may assist there as well. The airport, if I may say, I'm going to say this very cautiously, it remains a public space. There are people who are moving around. However, with intensified security, patrols, including our police officers, we arrest daily a number of, unwanted, people as well. For instance, whereby certain people who have been banned, for instance, were found loitering. It's through patrolling, intensified security patrols. So it does happen, and but it's dealt with vigorously with the assistance of the police, South African Police Services as well. So yes, it is happening. Brigadier Scott, you may speak to hijacking. We haven't, in terms of crime, had hijacking within the airports, but please speak further on that. I don't want to encroach. Yes, I think that's it, my addition from my side.
Thank you, ma'am. Brigadier Scott?
Yeah, just to elaborate there, the way that we're actually working at the airport, as I say, and the question was also asked, and I'll maybe speak into that as well. We've got, because we're a national key point, We are regulated as such, and we need to actually have what they call a joint planning committee. It's a forum where the security cluster gets together once a quarter, or when called, when necessary, in order to actually deal with the security of the national key point itself. We also have, obviously, because of the South African Civil Aviation and the expectations there of the local airport security committee, many of the same role players are there, except now it's expanded to include the border law, border control, border law enforcement. And then we also have the police-run security forums or crime forums, and we commonly know that as the Joint Operations Committee, and then there's an executive committee to that, which are the department heads, and that is the Joint Operations Coordinating Committee. So there are a number of committees at the airport, and you may ask why so many. Well, one is dealing with the national key point security specific. One is dealing with the aviation security specific, including aspects of safety that may be impacted upon that. And then, of course, as the SAPs, we are looking at the crime issues that are happening at the airport. So what we do at the JOCOM level and at the JOC level, we're briefed by the intelligence services, and we look at the crime pattern analysis at the airport to tell us what is going on and where is it going on. We immediately then sit down and we start tasking. Immediately we will form task teams. And if we speak now to, if I can maybe just use the example of the touters at the airport, those that are coming forward and touting for money, many times have got a second agenda. And that agenda is to either pickpocket you or to take your handbag and run off with it, or get you distracted while a second person removes something from you. So we see this happening there. We started to identify who the perpetrators were. It was difficult to catch these people red-handed. Some of these we have already arrested for these crimes because of the CCTV camera support, and they've been to court and they've been imprisoned. Others that are in the touting environment, part of the actual civil aviation regulations, 139, 1L, actually speaks to the soliciting of funds off of clients of the airport. That's illegal. So we've come to the understanding, because we've tried to arrest them as trespassers, but it's a publicly accessible area. We actually engaged the National Prosecuting Authority on this, the police at the airport, and we came to an understanding. So there's a process at the moment which is working. AXA provides 2 warnings to an individual when they catch them doing this. It can be the police or anybody else, but AXA, being the landlord, provides a warning according to their regulation to say, now you're aware. There's a second warning given to make sure, and then the third time they ban them from the airport. Thereafter, if they're even found at the airport, they're placed under arrest and taken to court. The process has been ironed out with the National Prosecuting Authority. It's either a 5,000 rand fine or 6 months imprisonment. And so many of these that do that have actually either moved on or been put in prison. They do take the chance to come back, because what these touters do is they actually have corrupted some of the security and police officials and others at the airport, buying them their free lunch so that they can stand around and tout. But these are issues that we try to work on as well. When we speak specifically to the theft as well that is happening in certain environments, we follow the same process. And in 2017, theft was the biggest crime driver at the airport. In a year, we had, if I can remember correctly, it was just over 1,200 cases in a year. And you can attribute about half of that was going to baggage pilferage, and the other half was going to actual theft on the land side. Pickpocketing, people that forget their telephones in the men's or ladies' rooms, go back, they're gone. You name it, they're all there. So that number has been brought down now to about 500-600 a year since 2017 to date. Because of the approach that we implemented, the JOCOM, we started focusing specifically, putting task teams in place, crime prevention operations in place, etc., arresting perpetrators. But it's a continual thing at the airport, the corruption that's actually ongoing on there. And we can speak from cleaners right through to police officers and pretty much everybody in between as well. So this is a fight that we are trying to do, and we've had senior meetings with AXA and the police on how we're going forward on a project plan to look at how to actually address the problems that we're experiencing now. It's going to be pretty radical, but it's necessary. I just want to speak quickly to the follow-home robberies as well. The problem at OR Tambo is that we are having up to 60,000 passengers a day pre-COVID moving through that airport. You can imagine how many people are actually either coming to fetch them. So it is almost a shopping mall on its own on that land side. To actually pick up the spotter, because people are not followed necessarily from the airport by the armed robbers. They have spotters inside the terminals that are walking there. And the last group that we managed to take down, and then it went quiet, was foreign nationals, and they were actually utilizing the e-hailing company Bolt. So they would arrive with the vehicle, they would go inside the airport to try and find business. They would also look at what was going on. They would identify somebody, follow them out just to the roadway and watch what car they got into or watch what car they drove out of the parking lot with. Then they would alert somebody on the roadway or on the upper roadway, which would actually follow them, not armed robbers, just a car leaving the airport, and they would decide or determine whether they were going on the R21 or the R24 towards Johannesburg. Once the route was chosen, that car would then telephonically speak the armed robbers into the actual target and turn back and go back to the airport again. And then the armed robbery would happen somewhere along the way, either at a traffic light or outside the victim's home address, etc. But it takes time, again, as I say, that we need to get, because these cases are not registered at OR Tambo. So we have to find out from the province at all the different police stations, where are they? And so we created a detective task team with a national detective capability and with the assistance from some of those us at Ortia. And so we've actually broken 2 syndicates like that. At the moment, there seems to be speculation it could be picking up again, but the last one that we've had, somebody was coming home from Ortia, but they tried to assassinate the person. There was no robbery involved. There was an assassination attempt where they shot through the car window. So that seems to be a hit and not a follow-home robbery, where robbery is the actual modus operandi. So in relation to the touters, the theft, and the follow-home robberies, that is where we're at. I think I'll wait for the other questions.
No, thank you.
More to answer.
I think the program director is panicking. Heinrich, I'll give you the final word and then I'll close it.
Well, thank you, Levuyo. I said I wouldn't use your name, but I've gone and done it. So my closing remarks is that security culture cannot be considered in isolation from the organizational culture. It has to be entrenched. Security should become an underlying value of the organization, and this is reflected in your management strategies, policies, and your final objectives. That will be all from my side. Thank you.
Thank you. I think in answering, further to adding to what Brigadier Scott, Mr. Peche's question, besides the coordination structures that we have at airport level, which Brigadier Scott has alluded to, nationally we also have a coordination structure, which is the National Aviation Security Committee. And that's where then all these entities that are responsible, if you've got any role to play, be it DHA, be it Customs, be it SAPS, be it SSA, SACA, Department of Transport, we all sit together, airline representation, airport representation, and then we look at the challenges that we face nationally. And then the reports from the LASCs, which Brigadier spoke, which is the local aviation security committees at various airports, those reports filter up to the CAA. And we're also able to take information from there that we think needs to be escalated to nationally so that it can be addressed. And so we do have these coordination mechanisms. And then there are other structures that get formed as and when, like Brigadier Scott was mentioning in 2017, we're having the Follow Me Homes were a serious problem. And then a structure was created at the airport specifically to deal with that, which was a coordination structure. And that's why then they died down. And right now we are busy resuscitating or reinvigorating that structure to deal with other challenges that we're facing. And we started Ortia and then we push them down to other airports. Annex 17, I'm sure the colleagues do know about Annex 17, even though nationally we expect them to comply to the National Aviation Security Program, which then takes the requirements of Annex 17 and localizes them for South Africa. And that's the document that allocates responsibilities to all entities that have got a role to play. So in closing from my side, I think, colleagues, anything else that you want in 5 seconds, Ms. Ngabiti?
Yes, I would like to believe that all of us as stakeholders, our common goal is to safeguard civil aviation against act of unlawful interference. So I would like to encourage all of us to continue and enhance security culture. We've received programs for implementation, and security culture is going to be implemented in all the aviation security organizations. And October month is a transport month. Besides other activities that will be done in organization, but I kindly request that October month, asibe busy. Let us be busy and have activities where we promote security culture, where we do awareness for our flying passengers, because when we do those activities, our clients also, we educate them, we educate the community. Let our community be ears and eyes for us within the aviation security industry. This brings me to the Brussels airport incident, because if the community knows and are aware of security culture, they will know when they see or hear something suspicious or a plan within the community where to report those. So let's continue and enhance security culture in our organizations. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, let me thank the four colleagues and thanks you for listening, and thank you, Program Director.
Thank you very much to the panel led by Mr. Luvuyo Geke. So as we just wait for the panelists to get off stage, I'm just going to throw forward to our next speaker. He's going to be speaking about reevaluating your organization's state of mind, the mental wellness toolkit. And that person is Mr. Jaco van der Westhuizen. He's the Chief Executive Officer of Mayday South Africa. Please do join us on stage.
Sure, they were not lying when they said you can't see anybody from here. That calms my nerves. Hello, everybody. My name is Jaco, and I have many bosses. I'm obviously married. I have many bosses. One of my bosses are actually sitting in front here. That's Mdawe. Good to see you. Thank you, Palesa, and to the program director. Just a correction. I'm worried that the rapture on surnames are going to take place before I say this. So it's incorrect. I would like to be part of this. It's not van der Westhuizen, it's van der Westhuizen. Just so that you know. So I know the item there on your program says it's the toolkit. I'm not here to talk about the toolkit, unfortunately. That is under development. But I'm so thankful for the captains of industry or the major generals of industry that they already mentioned the importance of human factors, and more importantly also mental well-being, mental health and well-being. So I believe the aviation-minded people in this room will be very familiar with this little photo. The swear jar is empty, and the jar where you need to pay a penalty when you can't stop talking about aviation or stop your shop talk. And that's exactly it. We don't mind talking about our job, about our environment and the industry that we're in. But there's one thing that we try and avoid at all cost, especially those real men and ladies of the aviation industry. Well, ladies have a tendency to be more open to speak about their feelings. By the way, crying is an emotion, right? Getting angry is also an emotion, right? Men? Gentlemen? Still an emotion. So men are also emotional, by the way. It's just the opposite side of the spectrum, unfortunately. Hats off to this lady. I don't know if you recall, in 2021, she was the #1 gymnast. Sorry, I speak a Kempton English, forgive me. She was the #1 athlete on the Olympic team for the US. And after, I think it was the second last or the second last item, she excused herself. It caused the States to actually lose the gold medal. But look at what she says there. It was a time for her to focus on her mental health and well-being. Ladies and gents, this cannot be overestimated, the importance of our own mental health and well-being. I know we don't like to talk about it, but that's why Mayday is there. As a start, we're definitely not the answer. and we know that. It's not a silver bullet, but the fact that it's a necessity in our industry that we start talking more about it and also destigmatize the fact that it's something we don't talk about. Because we're working with people's lives, whether it's just our own or our families, all of us in some way or another is involved. Either moving aircraft, looking after passengers, moving passengers. We actually would like to, in the near future, I don't know if there's somebody from AXA here, it's just a quick nudge there, move into everybody on the air side, because we need our faculty to be intact, right? This is something developed or published in 2020 by ICAO, and it's actually developed by a South African. And as I say, we're not the silver bullet. We know that it's a partnership that is necessary from across the industry. It's the aviation medical examiners, it's the employers, the employees, the professional associations, mental health professionals as well, and employee assistance programs. We're not in, Mr. Conradi actually mentioned it to me this morning that they started with an EAP. We're not in competition with them. We are complementing that. But the aim is to get ourselves to a point where we can start talking about our own mental health and well-being. This is how we see it or how we approach it. As you can see on the left-hand side, your left, I used to be an air traffic controller by profession, know what I mean? Yeah. So I know that if I look at that, it's on your left-hand side. Sorry, I'll stop bragging right away. My wife will, anyway. So it's on the left-hand side that we're looking at. It is worth gold if we identify this in ourselves or in our peers or even in our seniors and juniors, and that we put this on the table before it gets to a state where it starts affecting our licenses or where it starts affecting our decision-making. We've come to realize during COVID, we had a special program, Caring during COVID, that Mayday ran. The immense pressure that managers are under. You make safety decisions. It may not be turn left, turn right, climb, descent, or shall we start the descent now? Not at all. But you have a secondary level of decision making that impacts safety. So can you imagine your performance and that implication for safety if your faculty is not intact? So the idea is to become salutogenic. In other words, preventative, that we start talking about this long before it gets to a point where it affects our licenses, where it affects the safety of our industry, where it affects our own safety, for that matter. Kempton English again. And now this has stopped working. Oh, there it's working again. In where are we now? 2023, yeah. 2021, we did a quick survey amongst our aviation professionals. That's now cabin crew, air traffic control, engineering technicians, as well as pilots. Look at that, above average scoring. There was a handful of people that said we're feeling okay, but the vast majority were in the part where they said we are stressed or we are super stressed. And that's actually where Mayday started. Mayday didn't, our sister organization in Germany, Stiftung Mayday, actually started with peer support in the sense of post-aviation incident. Mayday South Africa actually started with a couple of pilots, and we've expanded since, but it started because of what people experience in South Africa. And I'm sure the majority of us have experienced it. I remember myself with oh dear, I can't remember what you call it. Well, the whole family was in the car and they took out 2 windows. And you know how, apart from the kids being in a state for quite a while, my own nervousness thereafter, stopping at a traffic light, as in what's going on around me. Now imagine that happens, or you get re-traumatized, and immediately thereafter, let's quickly make a decision about 200 people in the back of an aircraft. Or do we go left or right, or shall we call an emergency, yes or no? It affects our decision making. That's the bottom line. The good news is, if we identify it early, we speak to somebody, that helps us. It's part of the sense making and our brain recovering from that. All right, so significance of trauma. Quickly have a look here. If this is something that you have experienced or perhaps experiencing at the moment, that's more important. night terrors and flashbacks, sleeplessness, fatigue, memory and concentration lapses. I know married men, it may not be trauma, it's just the fact that you're married. Okay? Physical symptoms and illnesses, and then obviously when it gets worse, if it stays untreated, your chances of that turning into PTSD increases by 40%. It's not for everybody, but the chances increase by 40%. Why would we want to put ourselves and our industry at risk like that? As you can see there, when you start talking, it's your chances of reaching out to somebody improves your recovery by 3 times. Isn't that amazing? There was a study done by Dr. Donald Hudson, and he found that as soon as people get into the PTSD, post-traumatic stress diagnosis, 82% of them leave the industry, whether it was their job or whether they did it recreationally. They leave the industry within 2 years. We don't want that for anybody in this room, or for those that you know that's outside of this room. This is data that we again got. We don't have our own data currently within Mayday South Africa, but Stiftung Mayday shared this with us. So most people exposed to a traumatic event, shall I say, serious life stressors, we all experience that because we live in South Africa. There are many things that affect us. The non-normal has become normal for us, so it's more difficult to recognize. But 80% of us, especially aviation professionals, we have found your own coping mechanisms are adequate enough to recover, but don't take the risk. 16% of those people develop short-term psychological reactions. That's typically the time that you should perhaps not be flying, should not be serving, should not be controlling or serving the flying community. Be aware of your own environment. And then there's 4%, I see that cut off, my apologies. 4% where it develops into long-term mental illness. But through something as simple as peer support, it can be reduced by 80% to 0.8%. Can you imagine? There's a reason why, for example, the police have got debriefing processes. Sorry, completely off note, can I just say it's fantastic to see a senior officer carrying his sidearm. That's called male multitasking. So typically, what are we there for as Mayday, or when should you reach out for some support from anybody? And again, Mayday is not the silver bullet. If you have somebody at your church, if you have a good friend, if you have a colleague that you trust, not the office gossip, no, not at all. But typically, what do people reach out for or should be reaching out for? Obviously, we have drug and alcohol dependencies. As you can see, they divorce. Do you see the everyday things? We're not even talking about operational incidents yet. Grief, victims of crime, conflicts at work. No, I never conflict with my bosses. Just make that clear. Is this recorded? Is this no? Okay. People become stressed or anxious, especially after a multitude of stressors coming together. It doesn't have to be a traumatic event necessarily. It may be that there's just a huge amount of stressors that you're dealing with. I'm not going to share it now, but afterwards, please come and speak to me. I'll give you a couple of examples of how that started to affect people's performance that were perfect aviation professionals. And because of a cluster of multiple stressors, to a point where the psychologist said, you don't have what it takes. But thankfully, the person had a history of showing that they can actually do the job. So be cautious of that. This is part of how do we protect our license. Obviously, medical licensing affects people a lot, especially for people that are in the, if that pays your bills, it's something quite serious and it affects people immensely. And then post-incident, mainly, and that's where the value of peer support is in. People are able to speak up, and you don't have to explain to somebody what does it feel. Do you know that all people, have you seen white people? Huh? No, hang on, you're misunderstanding me. We all turn white when the engine fails, by the way. Right? That's what I'm talking about. We change color because it's stressful. Am I going to die now? And even when we land safely, there's a necessity that we debrief, some operational debriefing. People take strain. Cabin crew, for example, in the back dealing with a medical emergency in the middle of night in a narrow aisle of an aircraft. Can you imagine? Who is Mayday? I'm almost, program director, I'm almost done. Okay. We're a national network of offering peer support to all license holders and their families. We're there for the aviation industry. It's all volunteers. It's cabin crew, it's pilots, it's air traffic controllers, it is engineering technicians that we've expanded to. I'm proud to say, I'm so proud of that group of people. And even their families, we provide support to. It's trained volunteers, so it's your peers that has been trained as peer supporters. We are an independent Section 21, we're a non-profit. We're also a PBO, so a public benefit organization. And we have oversight by a couple of aviation experienced psychologists. Again, we've experienced it so much, how important it is that people understand. Me crying myself to sleep behind my desk, not that I ever do, but if it happens, nobody dies. But if some of you, if you're the safety manager at your organization, or if you are on the flight deck or in the cabin crew, and you're not coping, it has got a safety implication. Don't build the odds around yourself or stack the odds against you. What we are doing as Mayday, our next plans, and that's where the toolkit comes in. As I say, it's still under construction, but we do want to partner with the industry. We are expanding our support to the Search and Rescue Center, who's dealing with a lot of accidents and fatal accidents, so they get a lot of this unnatural exposure to life trauma. So we've upped our support to them. And we're also promoting, as I've mentioned earlier, what we call self-care. It's salutogenic. Do you pick up inside of yourself that, maybe I just need to speak to somebody? We are going to run a fundraiser. I'm so sorry. Is the DG, the Director of Civil Aviation here? I didn't, okay, then I can get away with it, right? Okay, so I didn't ask anything, though you can ignore. Our plan is going forward to develop more and more material that people can actually use. If you are uncomfortable as a CRM facilitator or the head of training at your flight school, or if you're leading a safety day at your club, to provide material, or to provide even the person with the material to speak to others about what does it look like? How do I handle that? If I have multiple stresses to deal with, if there has been trauma that I'm struggling to deal with. And then we do have training again in October 2023. That's why we do have the fundraiser. If you want to volunteer, there's a website there, email address there, please do. Contact us. The training is absolutely free. We provide our services to the industry absolutely free. It's a bunch of volunteers that care about the industry and care about you. Okay, I don't think the director is back, so it's still safe. There we go. So please take a photo of this if you don't mind, or ask me afterwards. This is the typical number that you don't care about until something goes wrong, and then you're sorry that you don't have it on your phone. You are more than welcome to follow us on Facebook or email. In the past, we've been supported through donations of the industry, but we all know what the industry has been through with COVID. So what we've started is actually fundraising events, and we're having a golf day on the 12th of September. We would love to have you there. Can we at least have a couple of female four balls? How's that for a challenge? But lastly, the evening social dinner is not a fundraiser, it's to get people together in the aviation industry post-COVID. We've got some wonderful entertainment going there. Miss Koza and Miss Ndawe is already doing, they're training now ready for a duet that evening as part of the entertainment. Some people would be willing to pay for that. I'm just putting it out there. And ladies and gents, that is me. Thank you very much.
To Mr. Jaco van der Westhuizen. I hope I got it right. Okay, in the interest of time, what we're going to do is that we're going to relieve you for now, not because we don't think your presentation is important, but we want to move on to the next panel. And then for anyone who's got questions for Mr. van der Westhuizen, you can ask them during the question and answer session for the next panel. And just another reminder that all the presentations, including ones that have those important phone numbers that you've just shared, it will be uploaded onto the CAA website, www.caa.co.za. So I'm going to release you for now. Thank you so much, Yaku, for that important conversation about mental health and awareness. We are now going to call the next moderator. That's Mr. Keith Maleho. He's going to be discussing exploring urban air mobility in South Africa. They'll be unpacking the concept and what it can mean for the South African aviation industry. And they'll be sharing perspectives on safety, its effect on current regulations, and its effect on economic growth in the country. Keith, please join me on stage. Have you told them? All right, we'd like to just first play the video before Mr. Maleho introduces his panel.
Am I audible? Oh, yes, I am. Ladies and gentlemen, that was the video, and that is what we're going to discuss today, this afternoon. And all credit, as a student myself, I always give credit reference. All credit to Supernel for coming up with such a great video. I picked up 3 observations from the video, one being innovation, technology, and creativity. And all of these 3 observations actually remind me of a saying, or just before the year 2000, when my grandmother used to harp on and tell me that trees will be talking in the year 2000 and cars will be flying. The latter is very imminent. We're very close to seeing cars fly, as you can see. And the tree talking business, well, I'm not sure about that. So, is it coming? Trees talking. Yeah. So looking at innovation, phrases that were picked up as new vision, everyday mobility by air. Think about it. Everyday mobility by air. The Secretary General from AFCAC was saying that 10% of Africa actually uses air transport for business per se, right? So there isn't much air mobility. And this advanced air mobility, urban air mobility, is going to enable us to go buy bread by flying. Imagine. Technology, talking about vertical takeoffs, vertical landings, low altitude flying, subways in the skies. That can't be true. But yeah, it is true, as I am an ATC myself, so I know about that. Creativity part, clean, fast, and road traffic decongestion. I mean, how can you do that, you know? And Mem Dawe had alluded earlier on when she was speaking about being agile, being lean, being able to make decisions pretty quick and fast. Ladies and gentlemen, without wasting any time, I'm going to let my great panelists introduce themselves. I'll start with the thorn amongst the roses, Meta Miko She. Joking, she's the rose amongst the thorns. Tamiko, please do introduce yourself and your organization.
I'm sure that was a Freudian slip there. Anyways, thanks so much. My name is Tamiko Schur. I am the Executive Director of the African Institute for Entrepreneurship. We are an NGO. We specialize in research and new technologies. So we've done a couple different publications actually on the drone industry, which I'll talk about a bit later. And incidentally, I'm also been in aviation 28 years. I hold a CPL with an instrument rating.
Quite an achievement. Thank you very much, Tamiko. Mr. Mahdi Hendricks, please do the honor.
Thanks, Keith. So my name is Mahdi Hendricks. I am with the Department of Economic Development and Tourism in the Western Cape, and I am positioned in the digital economy unit there. So our main focus is around technology and innovation, and how do we support adoption of technology by businesses and also support the growth of technology businesses in the Western Cape. Thank you for having me here.
Thank you very much for being here, Mr. Mahdi. And Tate Twala, please do the honors.
Thank you, Keith. As introduced, my name is Sam Twala, founder and managing director of Nsu Aviation Solutions and Nsu Drone Academy. What we do, we are mostly in the consulting. I'm a consultant in the industry, drone industry, and then we also provide training. That would be a pilot training. So my background in this industry, I used to work for Civil Aviation Authority, including air traffic and navigation services. So yeah, which is something that we're going to talk about. I mean, when you talk about drones, it's really my passion, and yes, thank you.
Yeah, don't start now, Sam, please.
Thank you.
Sam is an all-rounder, as you can hear. Followed by Sam is Mr. Kane Mainganya. Please do introduce yourself, sir.
Thank you, Keith. So my name is Kane Menganya, as Keith has said. I'm currently the acting senior manager for operations in ATNS. I'm an air traffic controller by profession, air traffic flow specialist as well, and my passion for drones started when I started interacting with the flexible use of airspace, where we currently accommodate RPAS within our current South African airspace.
ATNS is dominating these panels, eh? It's 2 out of 3 so far. Andre, my good sir, please do introduce yourself.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm Andre Meredith. I'm representing a drone development company called Aviation. We have a strong engineering capability in aero design, flight dynamics, artificial intelligence, modern production techniques using composite materials, and test flying. And I'm the Chief Safety Officer there and the airworthiness specialist.
Thank you very much. I think Andre summed it up. Innovation and all else, right? I'll start with you, Kane. As the guardians of the airspace, looking at advanced air mobility, and as an air navigation service provider, how do you see this whole concept actually shifting the landscape for an air navigation service provider?
So from an ANSP perspective, we see quite a lot of significant changes that will be required to accommodate UAM. From an ANSP perspective, we need to ensure that the infrastructure is in place, the communication as well as the air traffic management systems to deal with low-level altitudes, airspaces and urban airspaces to ensure the safety and efficiency of those airspaces. ANSPs will need to integrate UAM into our current ATM systems, which currently we have challenges with. And for us to achieve that, the big ticket items for ANSPs to deal with is the regulations. We need to ensure that we're able to include separation standards in what we do, because current separation standards are based on manned aviation and not unmanned aviation. So for us to decide what level ANSPs would want to get involved, as I said, we need to consider the safety and efficiency of that environment and the entire ATM system as a whole, ensuring that both can operate in harmony. And for us, I think for a lot of ANSPs that want to understand what the revenue aspects are, do we get involved from a UTM perspective, or do we add a plug-in environment for UTMs to come and plug in? There are also other revenue opportunities that we can look at, that we can consider, However, this needs to be a collaborative effort with the regulator, operators, industry experts, stakeholders, to ensure that we come up with the right policies and procedures to ensure that NSPs are able to enhance the UAM environment.
Thank you very much for your answer. I can deduce two aspects, or again, observations from your answer, which is regulations and research. And panelists, for the sake of the audience and whoever else is watching, can we please just keep it very simple? Because I'm sure not everybody knows what UTM is, Kane. UTM is unmanned traffic management, same system that is used to manage air traffic. Your planes that you fly, that system that manages it, that's what a UTM is, but for drones. Regulatory and research, which then brings me to Sam and Tamiko. But this time I'll start with you, Sam. In terms of regulations, right, and from a CIA perspective, when it comes to regulations, especially with new technology, we're always open to say, come through with whatever that is that you're dreaming about, come and present it to us at the CAA and Industry Committee Liaison Group. And let's then further dissect what is it that you actually are talking about. And from our perspective, we'll look at safety and security, right? So Sam, as an industry participant, right, and also I want you, when you answer me, you must also inculcate the regulatory framework. Considering that mobility is really a big challenge in Africa and other aspects, but for now we'll just keep it to mobility since it's aviation. How do you actually see advanced air mobility changing lives of your ordinary South Africans, and anybody else has actually never been in a plane?
Okay. No, thank you, Keith. A very important question, and I will start with maybe making this example. If you look at 3G technology in Africa, in African continent, that was a technology that, if you compare with other parts globally, it gained popularity very quickly, and the reason for that was a way to jumpstart and get to the position where other countries were able to get to by means of whether it was copper that was laid under the ground. So with 3G, it was a quicker way for people to get access to communication. And it was easier because apart from that, other means of communication were too expensive and going to be time-consuming. So when I look at what we're talking about now, air mobility, particularly looking at unmanned aircraft technology, that's exactly the same position where we are now, and that's how we're going to get to solve most of our problems quicker and most probably cheaper. So this is an area where I really see this kind of technology playing a significant role as far as a continent, as a country as well, being able to catch up in other areas, other technological advances where other countries manage to move much quicker, simply because maybe they might have had adequate money to be able to put money on research and development. And so this is where I really see this technology benefiting us in the continent. I mean, if I can make an example, yes, I know we're talking about air mobility. If you look at, for example, countries such as what's happening in Uganda, or where there's a zip line where they're doing medical deliveries, they managed to solve the problems which have been there for many years, and they were quickly solved and effectively solved by being able to use air as a mode of transport. So I see it in exactly the same light as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So what you're telling me is that air is actually underutilized. Not in so many words, right? Cool. Kane, I want you to ponder upon something. And but ladies and gentlemen, Ken is my friend, so I do know his thesis topic. It's on SATAM. How does AAM and drones actually fit into SATAM? Don't answer me now. Sit on it. I'll move over to Ms. Tamiko She. Tamiko, you do a lot of research, and you've said you recently published a publication focusing on unmanned traffic management, right? So which then also feeds ultimately to urban air mobility, advanced air mobility. What lessons did you then actually gain from coming up with the publication? What is it that you learned that you can actually tell the audience about?
Thank you very much, Keith. At AIFE, we really recognize that research is really necessary to be able to make evidence-based decisions. And when you're dealing with new industries, such as the drone industry, it can be very hard to get the right kind of data that you need to make those decisions. So there were we actually did another research report, which I actually interviewed quite a few of you here. And that was published in 2021, so if anyone wants a copy, it's a very comprehensive 124-page document on the drone industry in South Africa. You can get that via Keith. But we learned 4 things from that. And the first thing was that the potential of this industry was phenomenal, and that even for me as a pilot, I thought, oh, there's a cute little industry, I'll write a little report about it. We thought that it was incredibly important for entrepreneurs. How do we create new businesses? How do we create new jobs? How do we create new opportunities in this sector? The second thing we found was that, kudos to my colleague Sam, there was the legislation that was conducted in 2015, and South Africa played a leadership role. But that's fallen off, and South Africa's not in that leadership role, and I think there's a tremendous opportunity for South Africa to take that forward. The third thing we found was that the opportunities are not in the drones themselves and the flying of the drones. They're in the data and the offshoots in the data collection. And there's a very big misunderstanding, I think, in terms of the potential of the industry. And the last thing is we really feel that this industry is at a juncture where we can take advantage of it and build a new level of leadership for South Africa, not only on the African continent, but beyond. And this UTM paper actually came out on your recommendation, Keith. So I want to recognize Keith as being quite a leader in the field. And you said to me, I said, what's the next step? We had a huge body of research. You said the next step is to create the framework on which the drone industry can grow. So that's really quite critical. And we brought 10 experts together. So this paper wasn't done on our own in-house. It was done, Kane played a role in it, Sam played a role, and you, Keith, and several other industry, drone, and aviation experts. So that is this document here that just came out in December. And again, if you'd like a digital copy, Keith has action to that. So the concept behind that paper was to create a position paper on which we could build how to go forward in this industry, tapping into the expertise from all the different areas. And I'll talk a little bit more later about specifics around the UTM paper itself. Thank you very much, Tamiko. We're done with the philosophical ones in the middle. We'll go to the flanks now. And gentlemen, Mahdi and Andre, to the mechanics of it. Mahdi, you coming from the Western Cape province and government, and you're looking after economics in the digital space per se. So what I want you to then express to the audience is, what is the Western Cape's interest in urban air mobility, advanced air mobility? And while you're at it, if you may spoil us, please give us the benefits that come with this in terms of economy and social economy per se.
Okay, cool. Thanks for that, Keith. So I think from the Western Cape Department of Economic Development and Tourism perspective, our focus has always been around opportunities for job creation and economic development. So economic development that supports the creation of jobs. We're also in the process of developing our new growth for jobs strategy, and in that we have a priority focus area which is focused on technology and innovation. So we see opportunities in UAM that's kind of addresses some of our mandate around economic growth and job opportunities, as well as stimulating investment into our region, innovation, and meeting some of our sustainability challenges that we've targeted. So I think from an economic growth perspective, when it comes to job creation and business opportunities, we see there's going to be new opportunities arising in areas such as manufacturing, aviation, and technology themselves. And I think it's important for us to position ourselves that allows us to capitalize on this and boost our local economies. So we position ourselves favorably to capitalize on these opportunities. When it comes to technology, and I think, I don't know if you know, but Cape Town has one of the strongest technology ecosystems in Africa. We have a very strong, good ecosystem that works well together, and we advance in many of those technologies that I think the UAM would kind of support the UAM space. And I think for us, it's around how do we support UAM that allows these technology companies to respond to the requirements that is needed, and also to position ourselves as a province that can become leaders in an emerging field. It's quite important. We see opportunities around tourism. We think that UAM might open up a new space in tourism that attracts the tourists to the province. And the Western Cape itself, tourism is a major sector in the Western Cape. I mean, we're always trying to see how do we unlock more tourists coming to the province, and we see that UAM might have these opportunities in there that might encourage tourists to come to that region. We haven't unpacked exactly how yet, but I think there are opportunities in that space to do that. And then, I don't know how often you've been to Cape Town, but we've got huge congestion problems on our roads. And any initiative that kind of addresses and alleviates some of the congestion on the roads is something that we definitely want to explore, that improves the mobility of our residents within the province as well as visitors to the province. I think is something that we want to pursue, because that also then increases the overall experience of people visiting the kind of the Western Cape around the urban areas, and also gives us opportunities to encourage innovation and investment in that space. So I think there are big opportunities for us to look at that kind of feeds our economic mandate as well, and job creation, which we want to kind of capitalize on as well.
Thank you very much. I must say, ladies and gentlemen, Mahdi was telling me he's very anxious, but I think he handled that like a pro. I did live and work in Cape Town. I studied in Cape Town, so I know the congestion. What is really encouraging about the Western Cape government is how they embrace technology. I mean, we have case factors such as your BlackBerry, Nokia, that failed to actually embrace technology, and look where they are today. You spoke about economics. When we start talking about economics, we're speaking about jobs and so forth, right? And then that leads me to Mr. Andre Meredith, in terms of how do we then start to design these vehicles to make sure that our brothers and sisters actually get employed and get skilled to be actually able to design these vehicles, and make sure that we design them in a way that they are safe. If we want to make use of them like an everyday use, to go buy bread, I'll just hop on my small Anyana eVTOL or drone, go buy bread. I'll just call a drone to come drop some cake for me, you know. But how do we actually start equipping the people to make sure that, equipping them with the skill to make sure that they are well equipped, and whatever that they come out with in terms of design and airworthiness is safe?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Well, I think we should first realize that when you talk about urban air mobility, that there are actually two proponents of that. And the one is that there's a manned proponent, and the second is unmanned. So the manned proponent involves what is referred to as personal air vehicles or air taxis, which is becoming very popular worldwide now, not in terms of operations, but in terms of development. So there are a lot of new companies worldwide that are now getting into the market and trying to develop the latest personal air vehicle. And obviously the approach when it comes to designing these aircraft, when it comes to looking at a personal air vehicle and an unmanned aircraft is different. Even though when you look at the definition of a personal air vehicle, it actually relates to almost like a big drone with a person on board or multiple people on board. So, but you cannot view a personal air vehicle from a design perspective completely the same way that you view a drone, because there are people on board. So when you look at the way that the world is treating PAVs or air taxis, there are differences. I've looked at what America is doing and what the Europeans are doing. The Europeans are focusing a lot more attention on the integrity of the design of the air vehicle, whereas the Americans are looking at the development of sterile air corridors within which these vehicles will operate. You will not deviate from those corridors, and you will fly from point A to point B along that corridor. So there's a lot less emphasis on design integrity from the American point of view and a lot more from the European point of view. So I think there will be a lot more wrestling within the regulatory departments worldwide as to where should the focus be when we look at these vehicles. When we look at unmanned aircraft for urban air mobility, it also depends on the use case. So where are you going to employ this aircraft? Are you going to fly it from a very busy city center across a populated region into another city, or are you just flying between two rural areas with, let's say, a blood sample or whatever? So you would probably not certify a drone, a small drone. It's not cost effective, and especially when it comes to, as you've said now, empowering startups and the youth to get into it. You don't want to make it prohibitive. Certification is a very costly exercise, and you will definitely just kill off the industry if you just start enforcing certification requirements onto small drones. But having said that, you cannot just have a drone flying an urban route and not have it being reliable. So I think the big question would be what to look at from a design perspective, what needs to be reliable, the motors, the batteries, your navigation systems, your links, and what do those reliability levels need to be? Because those are at the moment open-ended questions which are not being answered. As far as getting people interested in the field, I think as more and more research is being done, more and more is being said in the media, more is being published, I think you will automatically get the youth involved. These aircraft are seen as robots, and the youth like that term. So they like the technology behind it as well. So I think it's a natural progression. But I think the correct awareness will be created when we start working with it. And so I think this initiative of yours, Keith, to make people aware of advanced air mobility or urban air mobility is great. I think it's needed. I think we have the perfect environment in the country to spearhead this because of our airspace, which is not as congested as the European airspace or American airspace. It's a great place where we can test it. And I think it's a great area where we can advance these technologies.
Thank you very much, Andre. What is quite clear, and what I know and from experience, is that with drones or technology and innovation and research, like you said, the conversation is open-ended. So for now, I'd like to then just pause it a bit and take questions from the floor, just to then get our audience involved. I see Captain's hand is up. Any other hand? It's technology, guys. Come on. Innovation? Next. Okay, Captain, please.
So, we are all aware about GATMA, which is involved in...
Sorry, Captain. Again, please say the whole word and not just GATMA for the benefit of the audience.
GATMA is the Global Unmanned Traffic Management Association. So they are involved in the innovative drone solutions and smart mobility solutions. And one of the greatest enablers they have identified is UTM as an enabler of safe and efficient solution to mobility. So one of the things we've learned since we promulgated the unmanned regulations in 2015 in South Africa is that we might have put the cat before the horse, in the sense that we never
dealt with issues in advance of UTM management. So what are your views with regards to UTM management as an enabler of the safe and efficient operation? Because without that, it won't happen. Thank you.
Yeah, I see a few people licking their lips for that question. Yeah, from my perspective, I'll say UTM is actually the building block, right? Because you want to approach it in a phased manner. You want to start crawling, walking, then running. Advanced air mobility, it's in the word itself. It's advanced. It's far gone. UTM was rudimentally. So that's where we need to start, right? And I guess it also builds up to my closing question. I won't go into it as much, but
international IFR, right? So international IFR, typically this would be the type of drone that would be able to take off from OR Tambo and land at Heathrow Airport. Now, that would exclude, if you look at the scope, of drone technology in general, that is not even 5% of drone technology. The majority, the big chunk, that would be, if you look at our industry as is currently in South Africa, none of the operations fall under international IFR. However, at the same time, we have a very huge industry, drone industry, that is touching almost all industries that you can think of, right? So at the time, also it was important to take into account that from the regulator point of view, and I'm talking like me in my past life, the idea was a regulator has a responsibility, which is to make sure that the aviation remains safe to at least acceptable level. But at the same time, industry had to start somewhere. And that's exactly where we started, which was part 101 of drone regulations. However, the idea is, yes, now we know more, now we know better. It's a number of years since initial regulations were promulgated. Now it's time to take a step further, which is what you're now making a reference to. One of the things that, common questions that I would get in the industry, particularly with those companies which are involved in logistics, the common question that they're asking is, how soon will I be able to deliver my parcels using drones? And it's painful to say, not anytime soon. And that's a fact, not anytime soon. However, looking at where the technology is or a need, how quickly we need to get there, we really have to get there as quickly as possible. But there are then important building blocks that we still need to find a way around and have solutions, which is what you're talking about, traffic management system. It's one thing if you have one or two drones within a given area delivering a parcel from one point to the other, even if they fly up to 50 kilometers. But the moment in a square kilometer you have thousands of drones, now you have a risk that you have to manage. So that's exactly the position where we are now, and that's where the gap that we need to cover, and next step where we need to move. Part 101 served its purpose. It was a learning curve. There were mistakes which were made, and there were gains as well. There were good things that came out of 101, but now it's time to open up and then take it a step further. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The infrastructure part of it, right? Otherwise, it's pretty pointless ordering all of these Ferraris, Lamborghinis, fancy cars to come and drive around, same as drones, fly around, if the road network is not there. That's where the UTM is. So we can't move on or move forward if we haven't set the infrastructure. Except you, Ken, you have your question already, and I'm going to implore you to actually close on that. As we close, under 30 seconds, adding to supporting Sam, what is it that South Africa then needs to do, as in yesterday, to actually realize this urban air mobility, advanced air mobility, UTM concept, a dream? I'll start with you, Mahdi. 30 seconds.
Cool. So I think, thank you for that. I think the ability to create the safe spaces for these technologies to kind of test, to develop these use cases and test cases is quite important. In the current environment, these innovators in the drone space, they don't have the airspace to test the technologies. So we need to create those safe spaces for them to test that technology. So when those technologies hit the market, they've been properly tested, they understand the risk that's been involved in that, and then the regulation and policies can be informed by those test results, but also that the policies and regulations support the economic development of those industries is quite critical. Because the drone ecosystem is not just the pilot that flies a drone or the company that runs a drone. There's other sectors that has benefit throughout the drone value chain, benefits from this. They can improve efficiencies, as you mentioned, in agriculture, in fishing, in a multitude of industries. And it's important that those test cases are tested properly so that when they're applied, we understand the implications of those.
Thank you very much. We need to have these labs in the sky.
Yep.
South Africa is pretty much known, especially in the finance perspective, economics. We're very sound in terms of policy, right? And the SG of AFCAC was here saying it's actually quite vice versa when it comes to aviation. Technically, we sound, we're excellent. Policy-wise, I think there's an opportunity for us to actually start working. Kane, your question still stands. I'll come to you. Tamiko, 30 seconds.
There's three things from my side that I think are quite important. The first thing is to integral understanding that drones are not only an aviation industry. On one side there's aviation, and on the other is the digital capabilities. You need to marry these two markets. They are intertwined together. The second is drones and UTM are a mode of transport. And we need to address that, integrate that into an overall transport strategy. A contact of mine, Guido Schwartz from Airbus, said, Tamiko, it doesn't make sense unless drones can carry a 1,000-kilogram payload. Well, they're carrying a 500-kilogram payload now, so we're not that far off. So we need to really start thinking, how are all these transport modes going to integrate? And the last part is we need a new leadership approach. This is a young person industry. I mean, I'm the one who contacts all of you and says, give me your advice, give me your feedback, give me your thinking. We need to bring young people in to lead and drive this industry, and to the point made about working at speed. This industry isn't going to wait for us. We've got to move very fast. We've got to take advantage of it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's lean, it's agile, it needs changes now. It's technology. It's here tomorrow. It's here today, tomorrow it's change. Andre, 30 seconds starts now.
Yes, we need a dedicated, you can call it an urban air mobility test site, or a test region, or a corridor, whatever you want to call it, where these technologies can be explored. So we have technology out there. There are companies that are very proficient. I mean, I work for one, where we develop these technologies, but the problem is integrating that technology within the national airspace. And you're not just going to take a new technology, specifically if it's an air taxi with a person on board, and just fly it in Joburg airspace. You want a safe area where you can actually test it, explore it, and not just the technology, but also the underlying rules and regulations and the procedures. I mean, what happens when an air taxi with 2 people on board encounters a manned aircraft? What happens then? Where all those things can be explored within a safe, controlled environment.
Thank you very much. I'm drawing my famous 3 C's, which is collaboration, cooperation, and co-creating from what you just said. And that is what is exactly needed. Doesn't matter which industry you're in. Kane, yours still remains. How will actually AAM, urban air mobility, affect SATAM, or vice versa, SATAM affect the concept?
Program director need to be protected. I think the chair is abusing our friendship. So you actually might change the course of my research paper now, considering that I'd never considered that aspect to start off with. But what comes to mind is one of the pillars of SATAM is the improvement of the aviation infrastructure. Particularly in this case, we need to improve the ATM infrastructure to enable SATAM throughout Africa. And I think the introduction of urban air mobility would achieve that. We would need to, through big data analytics, through automation, through AI, would need to improve the system to ensure a safer air traffic management environment. So that would be the first for me. The second, it would bolster economic growth, especially regionally. Would now be able to do cross-border drone operations that we need to start including in our multilateral agreements through the different states. And as part of the SATAM agreement, it should start seeing its way into those discussions. Andre spoke a lot about air taxis. We can move Mercy flights into air ambulances. There's a lot of opportunities from an African point of view that we can achieve through urban air mobility. And I'll leave it there.
Yeah, the basic services. I think if we were to incorporate that with SATAM and this technology, the basic services challenges that we have in our continent would actually be alleviated. And with that being said, Program Director, how's my on-time performance? Oh, sorry. Thank you very much.
Absolutely terrible, but it was a fascinating conversation. A round of applause, please, for this panel. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, I am fully aware that we are under severe time constraints. In fact, we're well over time at this point, but I would like to just beg for your indulgence for one last speaker who will come up, and we will wrap up the program. So please don't run away, especially after the conversations we've been having. I'd like to call Ms. Chinga Majeteze, who will be speaking on environmental protection. And you remember that earlier on, when we were speaking to the captains of industry, we touched a bit on the 41st Assembly resolutions of ICAO, and what does it mean for our continent, our country, and the aviation industry. Ms. Chinga, please do come to stage. Thank you.
Your mic is off, Zianda. I think she's announcing that it's myself, Pindi, we're coming to just say just one thing before Chinga starts. Ladies and gentlemen, we are very much aware that we have run out of time, but we do believe that the two remaining agenda items that we had in our program are quite interesting. In fact, they are quite critical for our industry. The DCA will be hosting road shows for specific sectors of the industry in the next 12 months. And we believe that we will use that platform for us to address the two topics, which was risk and performance-based oversight, which is a journey that we are on currently with the industry. And we just want to give you an update how far we are with that and what is to come. Secondly, we also wanted to just give you a sense of how we're doing in terms of implementing the global aviation safety plan from a South African perspective. And all of that is going to be communicated to you through the roadshows that are going to be starting, but they will be sector-based. But we are confident that all of you will get the message at the end. Over to you, Chinga.
Thank you very much. Let me just get used to this. Program Director, I need help. My apologies. Okay, it's fine. So thank you very much. My name is Chinga Majetese. I am a regional officer responsible for environment, and I'm based at the ICAO Nairobi office. It's really a pleasure to be speaking to you today. And it was quite exciting to note that as I was sitting there in the morning, the topic of environment was already introduced even during the first panel. And also the regional director from the WACAF region, he also touched a bit on some of the things that I'm going to be sharing with you. And since this is the last presentation of the day, please feel free to ask any questions. And it might sound like it's a bit difficult, but I'll try by all means to simplify it. And if you have any questions, this is the platform, and that's why we are here to make it clear and unpack these resolutions. So from the environment side, we're going to do an overview of the resolutions, and then we'll start unpacking each resolution bit by bit, and also explain what does it mean to the states, what does it mean to the continent, and from the industry side, what does it mean for you? So in overview, we have 3 resolutions that we agreed upon. So the first one is A4120, which talks on general provisions on environment and issues to do with aircraft noise, and issues to do with local air quality, which is linked to emissions, engine emissions. The second one is A4121, which concentrates on climate change and also introduces the long-term aspirational goal for net zero 2050. So we'll also explain what does it really mean by net zero 2050, what is expected from the states and industry in terms of LTEC, and how is ICAO providing support. And it also touches a bit on sustainable aviation fuels, because they do play a huge role in achieving this LTEC. And the last one will be on COSIA. As many of you are quite familiar with COSIA and the review process. So the first review for COSIA was done during this assembly. So a number of things were changed in terms of the offsetting requirements for COSIA. So we'll also be able to speak a bit about that. So on the first one, on general provisions. So for this first one, we are looking at things pertaining to the adverse effects of environment on civil aviation. So it covers quite a number of things. So under the general part, it will speak about things pertaining to, for example, the use of clean, renewable, and sustainable energy sources, where we are looking at even sources that can be used at airports, by the aircraft, etc. It will also talk to the role that land use planning and management plays when it comes to aircraft noise. It will also touch on technological improvements and innovation, and also on the role of air traffic management. You also heard in the morning from ATNS the role that flight procedure design plays when it comes to environmental protection, and the importance of engaging the community when it comes to environmental decisions. So under this, we have 4 objectives. Before the assembly, we used to have 3 environmental objectives. The first one looking at limiting or reducing the number of people affected by significant aircraft noise. The second one was on reducing the impact of aviation emissions on local air quality around airports, because these emissions are usually deposited during the landing and takeoff cycle. That's where you find most of the gaseous emissions from the engines being released and affecting the health of the people around. And then the last one was looking at the reduction of the impact of aviation greenhouse gas emissions. But this assembly, there's an additional objective that was added, which is ensuring future resilience of air transport by adapting its infrastructure and operations to the consequences of climate change. So climate change is a global problem that requires efforts from all sectors. But what does this mean now for the industry? So for aircraft noise, ICAO has developed a document on the balanced approach to the reduction of noise through noise management, and it has 4 pillars. So states are encouraged to adopt, for those that have not, this balanced approach when it comes to noise management, and also community engagement, where you find that developments around airports are not compatible with aviation. So we have a Circular 351, ICAO Circular 351, which talks on community engagement. It also touches a bit on the noise part when it comes to phasing out of aircraft. There has been the phasing out of Chapter 2 aircraft, which are ICAO Annex 16, Volume 1, Chapter 2 aircraft. So this resolution also talks about the phasing out of Chapter 3 aircraft, but it actually says that when it's not saying states should go ahead and phase out, but it's saying for those states that have informed ICAO of their interest to phase out Chapter 3 aircraft, they must not introduce any of these phase outs before they consider a number of factors. For example, the growth of the aviation sector in the state, the impact that it has on the industry, etc. So that is what we have for the first one. The second one is on climate change. Climate change is one of the Sustainable Development Goals. In the morning, we were told that there are 17 SDGs, and from ICAO side, our work on the environment contributes to 14 of those Sustainable Development Goals. So the SDG that we look at under this is the one on combating climate change and its impacts. This also talks to state action plans, which are documents that states develop to show us and to inform ICAO that this is what we are doing to reduce emissions from international aviation. And in this state action plan, there are certain measures that we call a basket of measures from ICAO that they have to implement and outline how they are making these reductions, what policies are in place, what plans do they have, and every 3 years, states are supposed to review these action plans. So for states that are yet to develop their action plans, the resolution that was agreed upon was that states need to submit these action plans for new submissions by end of June 2024, and thereafter update them every 3 years. And as you can see from the map, this is the status as of today in Africa. The states that are green are the states that have already submitted their action plans, and the ones that are white are the ones that are yet to submit. So this development in Africa pertaining to the submission, we actually appreciate the contribution that the EU did, because they provided funds under the ICAO EU project to help states to develop action plans. So the first phase actually provided funds to 10 states, and the second phase, which will be closing this year, also provided funding to 10 states in Africa. And these action plans now also talk to the long-term aspirational goal. So before we zoom into the long-term aspirational goal, there are also other goals that we've been agreed upon. For example, the aspirational global fuel efficiency improvement rate of 2% per annum from 2021 to 2050. And then we have the global goal that was agreed upon, the long-term aspirational goal, which is net zero carbon emissions by 2050, meaning that by 2050, we must net our emissions. So whatever we emit after 2050, we must be able to take measures to make sure that we bring them back to neutral. That is what it means. And this is in support of the Paris Agreement. And as some of you might know, ICAO works very closely with the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. And we report to the UNFCCC on what is happening in international aviation. So net zero 2050 is also a goal that has been agreed upon by many industry partners. For example, IATA has got something to do with net zero. So a lot of organizations and sectors are looking at net zero carbon emissions by 2050. So the information that we get from the state action plans pertaining to the measures that states are implementing will also complement and contribute towards this progress when we monitor from ICAO side what is happening in terms of achieving this. So between now and 2050, we'll be doing quite a number of things to monitor and to improve how we can reach net zero 2050. So LTAG, a lot of questions that we receive from states is LTAG focuses mostly on sustainable aviation fuels. If I can just go back a little. When you look at the graph that you see there, you can actually see that this is coming from the LTAG report. A study was done under the ICAO Committee on Aviation Environmental Protection on the feasibility of a long-term aspirational goal prior to the assembly. So the report produced the results that you can see on the graph. And as you can see there, sustainable aviation fuels play a huge role in terms of international aviation realizing this. But this means we need to have investments. It focuses on huge investments when it comes to sustainable aviation fuels. And as you heard in the morning from some of the airplane operators, they were saying we are actually on day 1, we are working towards day 3, and a lot needs to be done. So when we speak of LTAG, the questions that we normally have from states is, we are a developing state, for example, from the region in Eastern and Southern Africa, we are a developing state. Where are we going to get money to invest into these developments pertaining to sustainable aviation fuels? So what we would like to inform you is that when it comes to the LTAG, it does not attribute specific obligations or commitments to a state. So when you say we want to reach as the whole sector in aviation LTAG by 2050, it doesn't mean that we are going to set obligations and targets per state or the industry. It's voluntary. So we will not say we need to come up with goals on your own as a state to say we are going to do the following up to 2050 to contribute to ICAO's work. But what it means is that you do it according to your national circumstances and according to your own national timeframes. But whatever you do, we encourage states to report that information to us. And we also provide support on the various activities that states and the industry can do to help us realize this goal. So it also is linked to the UNFCCC's special circumstances and respective capabilities, which will inform the state's contribution to LTAG. For example, how mature are your aviation markets? And what are your national priorities for air transport development, etc.? And like we mentioned, sustainable aviation fuels play a pivotal role for us to be able to reach this goal by 2050. And what are these sustainable aviation fuels? Some may be asking, what do we mean when you say sustainable aviation fuels? So sustainable aviation fuels, according to Annex 16, Volume 4, it's a renewable or waste-derived aviation fuel. So what do we mean renewable? So renewable can mean it's actually coming from a plant. Maybe you are using sunflower to develop your sustainable aviation fuel, or maybe you are using jatropha, or you are actually using other things that are renewable, or it can be waste-derived. Waste-derived, one example that we can give that is easy to understand is the use of methane gas from landfills. You know, when you are dumping food waste, for example, organic matter at the landfills, it generates methane. So it's taking that methane and using it to develop a fuel. So you're using something from waste. Or maybe you've got municipal solid waste that you have. It's also one of the things that we regard as waste-derived and as a feedstock for sustainable aviation fuels. So when you look at these sustainable aviation fuels, they need to meet certain criteria. And we have what we call cost-eligible fuels, which include sustainable aviation fuels and lower carbon aviation fuels, LCAF. So we also encourage the creation of activities that help with the development of LCAF, the lower carbon aviation fuels. And what are these lower carbon aviation fuels? It means it's a fuel that is fossil-based. It's coming from fossil, but with a lower carbon content. So there are quite a number of examples. For example, CNG, compressed natural gas, is one example. And including these will actually include involving the sustainability criteria set by Annex 16, Volume 4, and also life cycle methodologies. So for us, people may also say, there are so many fuels that have been produced. For us, a fuel becomes a sustainable aviation fuel or an LCAF if it meets the ICAO sustainability criteria and life cycle methodology. Because we want to see, if it's a plant-based fuel, you are growing your jatropha, there are certain things that we look at, water, etc. Soil, when you're transporting it, how many emissions were emitted, and we look at it on a life cycle assessment. So for this, we have a new guidance that we have developed, which is on the policies and coordinated approaches that can be used by governments when they want to look at sustainable aviation fuels. And we are also excited to let you know that we have received an intention to support with funding from the EU for projects, for feasibility studies for states in Africa. So we'll be very soon, in the next maybe month, we'll be actually contacting those states that have been selected to be receiving this support under the ICAO EU project on sustainable aviation fuels. And so what does this mean now, this LTAG and this resolution A4121 on the continent, the states and the industry? For the state action plans, it means states that have not submitted are encouraged to submit. And for those that are yet to review, we encourage you to also update your action plans. And where possible, if you can assist other states, we also encourage the creation of buddy partnerships, state action buddy partnerships, where a state that has developed an action plan provides assistance to a state that has not provided the action plan. And this is all under the ICAO No Country Left Behind initiative. And this role of sustainable aviation fuels in achieving LTAG means that the states and industry partners could consider becoming partners in the ECTSAF. And we are also happy to inform you that South Africa is already a member of ECTSAF. ECTSAF is a program that was created by ICAO in June 2022, where we are looking at how do we move this SAF to ensure that we meet this LTAG. So how do we work together with states and industry to come up with this? So we created a program that we call ECTSAF, which stands for Action, Capacity, Assistance, Capacity Building and Training on Sustainable Aviation Fuels. And it involves a number of industry sectors, and we'll be showing you in the next slide. And this transition towards SAF, like we mentioned, requires a lot of investment, both public and private, so which means there's need for financial resources. So for those that will be thinking, where do we get the financial resources? From our side, we've already started connecting with a number of financial institutions in the region, for example, the African Development Bank, etc., worldwide, the World Bank, for example, to find out if there's a way where they can also become SAF partners and support this initiative. So for airplane operators, what does the A4121 mean for you? It's very linked to COSIA and the monitoring and reporting and verification process. So it means as aeroplane operators who qualify and who are under the scope of the COSIA, you need to continue providing that information pertaining to monitoring, reporting, and verification, particularly where there is the use of SAF or LCAF, because this information is what we will use, that data is what we will use to be able to say, have we really reached LTEC 2050 or not? So this role of sustainable aviation fuel is very important, and this I will just skip through. It's just showing you the developments in terms of the number of airports distributing SAF, how many policies are there in the world, and also mentions that this SAF are actually drop-in fuel, meaning you don't need to do anything to the structure of the aircraft. Chemically, they will just work the same way as your normal Jet A or Avgas, etc. type of fuel. So this one is also just elaborating on the ACT-SAF and the different partners that are there. So we have states coming in to say, I am state A, I'm able to provide support. Or it can be, I am state B, I am looking for help. So we are looking at those 5 different partners that you see: the states, financial and development organizations, international groups, the industry, which involves the airlines, manufacturers or producers of fuel, as well as education and academic institutions. You know, things pertaining to fuels, it really needs the academic sector to come in, because we have got so many people studying chemical engineering who are involved in this, who can be able to assist us. So what happens is, depending on your need, if you are a state coming in and saying, we are here, we have got everything, but we don't have financial support, we'll link you up with those financial institutions, and memorandums of understandings will be developed. And all this is done under the umbrella of ICAO. And why are we coming up with this program? Is because SAF play a huge role when it comes to the achievement of the LTEG. So the last resolution that we have is A4122. So these equations are not here to scare you, but we will be moving from this slide to the next one, just to explain, to give you an understanding. So for us now, you know, with COSIA, it's about offsetting and reduction. The O part is offsetting, which is what we are dealing with right now. The R on COSIA was reduction from use of sustainable aviation fuels, which is what we have covered in the previous slide. So for this one now, for offsetting requirements, how does an aeroplane operator, after the compliance cycle, which the first pilot phase started from 2021, 2022, and will end 2023. So in 2024, those airlines that have participated or that have conducted activities on COSIA routes are expected to offset. So as an airplane operator, how do you calculate these offsetting requirements? So the first equation is actually showing us how you'll be calculating these emissions from 2024 for your routes that you conducted from 2021 up to 2032. And this is what the new resolution is mentioning. So it's saying we are looking at ORY, which is the operator's emissions. For us to be able to know how much you emitted, we need to calculate your actual emissions times what we call a sectoral growth factor, the SGF. So this SGF is the growth of the whole sector, because we want to cushion you and say, okay, you are an airline, maybe you are still growing, we need to cushion you. So we're going to look at the growth of the whole sector. So for us to be able to calculate the SGF, we need what we call a baseline, which is the SABY. So this baseline, before it was the baseline of 2019 and 2020 emissions, but that has been changed with this review of the COSIA during the A4121. And the last one is after 2033, when you calculate emissions, if you look at the first equation and the last one, there is a plus that is there. So that plus introduces an individual contribution of your growth as an individual operator. So maybe just to go to the next slide. So the first periodic review of the COSIA was done in 2022 during the 41st Assembly. So what it said under the baseline is that for the pilot phase, we are going to look at the baseline using 2019 emissions only. Previously, we used to say baseline is 2019 emissions plus 2020 emissions divided by 2, the average. But because of the impacts of COVID and what happened in 2020, the Assembly decided that we are going to only use 2019 data as the baseline. And what is this baseline? This baseline is what we are going to say, this is the cap of our emissions for COSIA offsetting for that given year. Whatever we emit that is above this 2019 data. So let's say we are in 2021. We have emitted a number of emissions, the whole sector. We'll go and say, maybe we have emitted 50, let me give an example, 50 tons. We'll go and say, the whole sector, international aviation, has emitted 50 tons. But in 2019, for the same routes, what were the emissions? So let's say in 2019, there were 20. The difference between 50 and 20 will be what we need to compensate for, if I can put it in quotes. So that baseline, that 20 that we gave as an example, is what we were saying before. We add 2019 plus 2020, but now with the new resolution, we're only looking at 2019 emissions. And then after the pilot phase, now from 2024 to 2035, this is the first phase of the COSIA and the second phase, up to the end of the COSIA. We are going to be looking at 85% of 2019 emissions. So pilot phase offsetting requirements baseline is just 2019. But after that, it's 85% of that value in 2019. And when it comes to offsetting requirements, which are these ones, the last equation that you see there, where we said it involves the contribution of the sector as well as the individual aspect. Initially, for 2030 to 2032, we're going to just say 100% sectoral growth. Previously, it included a bit of an element of the individual aspect. So what it means for you as an airline is means when it comes to offsetting, some of the offsets that you're supposed, some of the emissions that you were supposed to offset as an airline are going to be cushioned by the whole sector. So it's actually an advantage when we look at 100% sectoral growth. But from 2033 to 35, we are going to be looking at 85% sectoral growth and a small portion from your individual growth, which is the 15%. So just to go back maybe for understanding, on the last equation, so what we are saying is the first part with the percent SY with SGF is what we are looking at as 100% sectoral growth. So between now and 2032, we are looking at that only. So the plus side are the additional requirements for an operator. Those are not going to be included because it's going to be plus zero because there's no individual aspect. But from 2033 now, when we introduce that 15%, it means there will be an additional 15% that attributes your emissions to your own contribution as an operator. But these percentages that we have been changed because previously, before the review, we were actually looking at 30% sectoral and 70% individual, which means as an airline, you were going to compensate for more because there was no cushioning. The cushioning from the growth of the whole sector was only 30%, and the 70% was coming from you. But with this review, you're actually only going to be contributing 15%. So for the operators, this will actually be good news for them, and as you heard in the morning, it's about spending money on purchasing these emissions units. And the last thing that also pertains to the offsetting and COSIA was the issue pertaining to new entrants. So let's say you're a new operator that has started operating. It's now saying, initially it was, we'll let you grow because you're new. The COSIA requirements, even if you fall under the scope of the COSIA, are not required to offset until your emissions reach 0.1% of 2020 emissions. But because of COVID, the Assembly decided we'll only look at 0.1% of 2019 emissions. And this is for all the COSIA phases. And this is also extended beyond the pilot phase until 2035. So this is what was decided on the offsetting requirements for COSIA. And then what does it mean now, these numbers that we have been talking about to the industry? It means as an airplane operator that falls under the scope of the COSIA, you need to continue with the monitoring, reporting, and verification in accordance with the timelines that are given in the Annex 16, Volume 4. And also, airplane operators and states also need to take note of these changes in terms of the percentages and the offsetting requirements when calculating offsetting requirements for COSIA. And also, states need to take necessary actions when it comes to regulations and development of policy frameworks pertaining to COSIA. And we also have another partnership that we have, which we call ACT COSIA, Assistance, Capacity Building and Training, which also provides a number of support to understanding this COSIA scheme. So we also encourage partnerships among states on this initiative. And to conclude, we just want to inform you of the upcoming regional seminar, which is actually starting next week. And this regional seminar is going to be covering a lot on LTAG. And these regional seminars are happening in all the regions. So yesterday, we started with the Euronet session, and it's actually finishing today. So next week, we'll be having our Africa session, which will include ESAF and WACAF states, and it's going to be hosted by the regional office in Nairobi, 18 to 19 April. So it's an opportunity for you to understand more on LTAG and ECTSAF. What are the financial implications? As the industry, if you want to introduce SAF, what are the costs? How do you use the SAF rules of thumb to calculate the cost, etc.? And then we also have, to support work on sustainable aviation fuels, we have the conference on aviation alternative fuels, the third conference, which will be happening later on this year in November. It is a big conference where we bring about states and industry, and we do a stock taking on what is happening in the states, in the world pertaining to sustainable aviation fuels, and how can we move this initiative forward in order for us to reach LTAG. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to Ms. Chinga Majateze. Are there any questions for her as we wrap up today's program? Any takers? Yes, we have one on my left. Please may the mic reach the lady in the front. Roving mic, please. It's on its way. Please just don't forget to indicate who you are and where you're from, and then fire away.
Thank you very much, Program Director. Thank you, Chinga, for informative presentation. My question is, what is the criteria that is going to be used to determine the states that should receive the funding to conduct the research on SAF?
Thank you very much for that question. So what we normally do is we first look at states that have requested for assistance. Because it's one thing to say to a state, we have got this funding, when they are not interested. So we look at states that have actually submitted requests for support to ICAO to say, we want to develop SAF in our state, we need support. So we look at those states. And then we also look at other things, for example, the climate risk factor of the state. We have data from the UN on that, and other things. But the first thing that we look at is whether a state has requested for support or not. That's the major thing that we look for.
Are there any other questions? Going once, going twice. All right, it seems we're done. Thank you so much to Ms. Chinga Majateze. Give her another round of applause. She's from the International Civil Aviation Organization, very much tying in with what we were discussing earlier on this morning. Ladies and gentlemen, we've officially reached the end of our program. Thank you so much for your patience, your indulgence, your engagements. Today we're cruising nicely at 17:35, and yeah, I had to pick up on something today. And just before we officially close the program, on the tables in front of you, there are QR codes. We'd like you to please give us feedback on how we can improve. It just takes 2 minutes to complete, so please do indulge us just one last time before you leave. And also not to forget the Civil Aviation Awards. Ms. Popikoza actually did speak about it. It's officially open April 2023. And the next conference, I'm sure you're looking forward to it, is happening in April 2024. So please do keep updated on our social media pages. Today's hashtag was hashtag NAC 2023 at official SACAA, both on Instagram and on LinkedIn. So that's my lot for today. Once again, my name is Ziyanda Ngobe. It's been an absolute pleasure being in your company here today. And I wish you a safe onward journey. But this is my lot. I would first like to also call to the stage the vote of thanks and from the Civil Aviation Authority. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Program Director. I think it's good afternoon, going into evening, to my principal, the DCA, Director of Civil Aviation, our CEOs who are still with us this afternoon. I think I have the privilege, and to our guests as well, I think I have the privilege of just thanking you all, but before I get into the details of thanking you, I must apologize for the lengthy program. If you know civil aviation, we rather have more content than less, and I think I've seen this conference mature over the years. And I think we always strive to give you the best. So as the Executive Corporate Services indicated, the two presentations that were not shared will be shared, and I'm sure you're going to make up the time on that you missed out. These types of conferences are not an easy event to put together. As you can see from the caliber of the speakers, the fact that we were able to get the Deputy Minister to open the session, to get our board chairperson, to get CEOs together, it's by no means an easy task. So let me express our appreciation to the Deputy Minister of Transport for making time in his busy schedule to attend and to deliver a very invigorating keynote address. The Ministry's support is much appreciated. I would also like to thank our board chair and our board members for their attendance today. We appreciate their guidance and leadership at all times. I would also like to express my gratitude to all the delegates who came from far and wide to spend the day with us, sharing your thoughts and being part of this meaningful gathering. Your presence as aviation stakeholders and your willingness to listen, to grasp, and engage with the content is the reason why we are gathered here today. Thank you also to each of our presenters for your insightful presentations and your valuable inputs towards the various topics, including those that came from afar. All the presenters added new knowledge and encouraged us to think more deeper, more innovatively, and broader as we reimagine the future of aviation. Similarly, the participants in the panel discussions stirred up new avenues for deliberation and implementation, showing us that the future of aviation operations and aviation safety and security is changing at a very fast pace. I would also like to express our appreciation to the very talented program director for your smooth handling of the program. I'm sure it was not an easy task, but you managed exceptionally well. To everybody who made today possible, working tirelessly in the background, including corporate services, under the leadership of our executive, Ms. Pindiwe Gwebu, we appreciate your enthusiasm, your creativity, your attention to detail, as always. I wish you all a safe journey. Until we gather again, I believe that our endeavors towards safer skies and a progressive and prosperous aviation industry will continue to blossom. I thank you.
Do you wanna be reckless? Well, come with me. Do you wanna go quickly? Do you wanna go slow? Well, Helen, you know your beauty's like a Titan bow. Like a Titan bow. Oh, like a Titan bow.